From the east, the Eastern barbarians, the ghoul race's giant flying spirit artifacts, giant flying beasts and small spirit artifacts flew towards them like flocks of birds. They hadn't just come from the sky. There were many ships with Eastern barbarians with quivers on their backs too. The Heaven Ghoul race, Earth Ghoul race, and Blue Ghoul race moved alongside the Eastern barbarians. They looked savage, their eyes alit with cruelty. The Eastern barbarians and the ghouls are coming. The enemy has arrived. Prepare for battle. Deafening shouts rattled the islands of the Setting Sun Islands for a moment. The martial practitioners of Flaming Sun Island, Blood Fiend Sect, Terminator Sect, Heavenly Sword Mountain, 10,000 Beast Mountain, and Celestial Artifact Sect all took to the skies with solemn expressions on their faces. Many giant spirit artifacts and experts clad in colorful light also appeared in the airspace of the Setting Sun Islands. We will continue our talk about Dark Shadow World after this war, Xianxia said while looking stern. Act at your own discretion. Whoosh! He released the demon sealing tombstone and sent a command to the 8 god corpses. The 8 god corpses that looked like 8 bronze mountains suddenly rose from beneath the sea after receiving Xianxia's message. Gee. An eerie laugh came from the ghoul race's camp. An old, tiny, gray-black earth ghoul that looked like a midget flew over while riding a 5-level soul altar. His soul altar sparkled with pitch-black light, and his laugh sounded like the caw of crows. It was extremely unpleasant. In the blink of an eye, the old earth ghoul flew ahead of the others and stopped in above the Setting Sun Islands. While laughing shrilly, he waved his short arms and pressed many bolts of black light into his 5-level soul altar. Black, fleshy balls rolled inside the pitch-black soul altar and made the vessel grow bigger and bigger. It didn't take long before his 5-level soul altar turned into a giant wriggling ball of flesh. The black, fleshy ball continued to wriggle until it finally transformed into a short, dark-skinned and black-dotted giant earth ghoul. Those who paid attention would notice that that giant earth ghoul shared the same appearance as the old man. That old man stood on the head of the earth ghoul warrior that was 1,000 times larger than the original, dancing and laughing with unabashed arrogance. He allowed the warrior's flesh and blood aura to radiate without restraint. After that soul altar had transformed into a giant earth ghoul warrior, it wasn't smaller than the giant race experts Xianxia saw at Boluo Realm. Even the Eastern barbarians' flying spirit artifacts and giant ships looked small compared to that earth ghoul warrior. A soul altar is truly miraculous. To think that it can be transformed into a terrifying flesh and blood warrior like this when injected with large amounts of refined flesh and blood energy. I seldom saw anyone using their soul altars this way. Luz of the Dark Shadow race rubbed his chin seriously. Unfortunately, I'm not a Dark Nether clansman. Otherwise, I could activate my bloodline powers and transform into a demon god myself after my bloodline reached rank 10. The old ghoul did this so that his side has the morale advantage over Flaming Sun Island. Tang Beidou snorted coldly. He subconsciously looked at the 8 god corpses and discovered that even they weren't as big as the giant earth ghoul warrior. The god corpses were technically at the late stage of the imperishable realm. Their flesh and blood strength was the same. Generally speaking, the larger an ancient being was, the stronger their bloodline powers were. That was why ancient races such as the ancient beasts, dragons, and giants grew larger as their strength increased and bloodline evolved. The god corpses were obviously the same. The stronger they were, the bigger their physical bodies. Istin of the Earth Ghoul race had injected his soul altar with a tremendous amount of refined flesh and blood energy using a racial secret art and transformed it into an Earth Ghoul warrior 1,000 times larger than the original. When the giant Earth Ghoul warrior roared above the Setting Sun Islands, the sea rippled and the islands shook in response. Not even the 8 god corpses are as big as Istin. The Horn Demon race and the Dark Shadow race don't have the ability to transform themselves either. None of them can grow bigger than Istin right now. Kuyu of the Black Barbarian tribe laughed loudly. Even I'm afraid of that gigantic Istin right now. I'm certain these Land of Chaos bastards will lose their will to fight very soon. Once their morale weakens, we'll be able to gain the upper hand in this battle. Another Eastern barbarian elder laughed. The Earth Ghoul race should be the tiniest race of all of us, so how did he transform into that giant thing? It's so scary. It probably can flatten Grey Island in one stomp. This is unbelievable. A lot of martial practitioners on the Setting Sun Islands were shocked by Istan's transformation. Many of them had subconsciously compared it to the 8 god corpses and discovered that even they weren't as big as Istan. Istan had successfully intimidated the allied forces. Many weak martial practitioners began to tremble in fear. As Kuyu had said earlier, their morale had dropped even before the battle began. Many people even felt like the ghoul races were invincible. Eh! Luz suddenly let out an exclamation. Another stifling presence suddenly rose from among the ghoul races. A lot of ghouls cheered while others stared at them in astonishment. It's Lord Fiennes. Lord Fiennes has awakened as well. This is too good. A ferocious-looking blue ghoul elder howled sharply while he was cheered by the ghouls. He also set loose his soul altar and caused it to grow into a giant blue ghoul warrior like Istan's using a secret art. Both old ghouls stood on the heads of the giant warriors and laughed arrogantly in unison. There's another giant ghoul. Oh heavens, what do we do? How can we beat them? The martial practitioners of Heavenly Sword Mountain, Celestial Artifact Sect, and 10,000 Beast Mountain were afraid of the ghoul races from the beginning. Now, their fear level only increased after witnessing the creation of another giant ghoul by Fiennes. They have another 5-level soul altar expert. Luz's expression also changed. Qianlai's expression grew even more severe. Istan and Fiennes didn't rush into action after their soul altars had transformed into giant ghouls. They simply laughed loudly at the land of chaos forces. Qiyang, Feng Yi, and even Lei Yan wore heavy looks on their faces. Suddenly, they felt that this battle would end badly for them. At first, Qiyang and Feng Yi thought that the ghoul races only had Istan. Luz of the Dark Shadow race was a 5-level soul altar expert himself, so he should be able to suppress Istan even if he couldn't transform into a giant. As the master of 10,000 Beast Mountain, Qiyang had a secret art that could suppress the first voodoo creature. Besides that, the land of Chaos allied forces actually had a slightly bigger army than the Eastern barbarians and the ghoul races combined. That was why they thought that this battle would be very easy at the beginning. They thought that their chances of victory were huge, and that the situation was all under their control. However, Fiennes of the Blue Ghoul race had tipped the balance against them. It made them afraid as the realization that the situation had gone out of hand hit them. Sect Master, I think we might actually lose this battle. Artificer Luohan frowned deeply and bitterly. Maybe we shouldn't have come here. Behind him, the many elders who were against Feng Yi supporting Flaming Sun Island in the first place looked afraid as well. Just the same, a lot of 10,000 Beast Mountain martial practitioners were suggesting to Qiyang that they should leave and preserve their strength if the war turned out to be unfavorable for them. Conflicting voices were already starting to appear in Celestial Artifact Sect and 10,000 Beast Mountain even before the battle had begun. It was all because of Istan and Fiennes' terrifying presences. Even Heavenly Sword Mountain's martial practitioners were sparkling with an ulterior light. They're not all in the same sect, so the first thing that entered their minds the moment they encountered an obstacle was to preserve their own strength. Luz snorted as he stared coldly at their allies. He said to Qianlai, "That is how it has always been within the human race. The Horned Demon race, Dark Shadow race, and Ghost Eye race are different. Once we confirmed our enemies, we would obey our leader's orders and charge them even if we knew it would cost our lives." Qianlai frowned in secret. He could see that Celestial Artifact Sect and 10,000 Beast Mountain's martial practitioners were whispering amongst themselves. Their eyes also looked uncertain and wavering. This meant that they didn't have a unified opinion. That's because we haven't fought with each other before and built trust in each other. If we had fought side by side like this a couple of times more, we wouldn't have looked as uncertain as we are now. It was at this moment Li Mu spoke up before pointing at Blood Fiend's sect, saying, "Look at their disciples' eyes." Surprised, Qianlai obeyed his request and looked at the Blood Fiend sect commanded by Mo Lingye and Mo Jun. He noticed panic on their faces too, but there were no secret whispers about preparing for the worst-case scenario were exchanged between them. In fact, they looked relatively determined to see this battle through. A lot of people were also looking his way. They seemed to grow slightly more spirited and confident after doing so. At the beginning, you had defended them and beat back the three great families and the Gongya brothers of Black Voodoo cult. After that, you forced Jiang Zhuge to abandon his original plans and retreat. Then, you made a comeback against Wenbin and forced back Illusory Demon Sect. Finally, they beat back the ghoul races with you at the helm. Li Mu smiled. You have done many things that looked like miracles to them. That is why they all believe in you. That is also why they still believe that this battle is winnable despite Istin and Fine's terrifying presence. They are fearless because they believe in you. Qin Lai trembled in realization. Now, if you will look at Jiang Zhuge's forces, Li Mu said. Qin Lai naturally turned his gaze towards Jiang Zhuge's blood drinkers. The blood drinkers' scarlet eyes were bloodthirsty and warlike. Istin and Fine's attempt to intimidate them seemed to have failed completely. When they occasionally turned to look at Jiang Zhuge, their eyes were filled with fanatical worship. It was as if Jiang Zhuge was the god in their hearts. Jiang Zhuge is an extraordinarily charismatic person. His blood drinkers worship him so zealously that they can kill themselves for his sake at first notice. They will charge Fines and Istin without a heed for their own lives if Jiang Zhuge were to give them the order to do so. This zealousness is a terrifying power. Li Mu sighed. Qin Lai subconsciously looked at Flaming Sun Island's martial practitioners with a thoughtful look on his face after he heard this. He noticed that his martial practitioners weren't frightened by Istin or Fines either. Although Flaming Sun Island's martial practitioners weren't as crazy or fanatical as the blood drinkers, they were full of confidence. You are the island master of Flaming Sun Island, and your subordinates see you as the soul of their sect. If one day you command enough presence to turn them into zealots just like the blood drinkers of Jiang Zhuge, their fighting power will reach a whole new level. Li Mu said while rubbing his chin. Speaking of which, there is one person under you that's very similar to Jiang Zhuge in terms of individual charisma. Li Mu pointed at a certain person from a distance. The way his subordinates look at him is very similar to how the blood drinkers look at Jiang Zhuge. Xianxia. Qin Lai couldn't help but exclaim softly. Amen. Xianxia's blood spear is the same as Jiang Zhuge's blood drinkers. They are bloodthirsty, warlike, and they worship their leader zealously. Xianxia may only be at the fragmentation realm right now, but he possesses a very rare charisma. Li Mu smiled. Xianxia has great potential, and his self-restraint is better than Jiang Zhuge's. If he becomes as strong as Jiang Zhuge one day, his future may be greater than Jiang Zhuge's. Li Mu paused for a moment before continuing. If you want Flaming Sun Island to improve further, and if you want to truly rule over this land, you must first utilize these extraordinary people around you to the fullest. You should know that you are the soul of Flaming Sun Island, and only you can lead it through all obstacles and make it into something greater. Your partner, Miss Song, is just a woman. She may be able to manage Flaming Sun Island and handle the financial matters for you, but she can't turn you into a god inside your subordinates' hearts. When your martial practitioners worship you to a point that is beyond almost all reason and logic, they will become fearless and resistant to all temptation. They will be unafraid to die for you in battle. Li Mu looked at him deeply before saying, the reason Terminator sect was able to become the strongest force of this land isn't just because Nan Zhangtian is the strongest cultivator of the land of chaos. It is also because every Terminator sect martial practitioner views him as a god of war and will obey his every word and order as gospel even if he turned out to be wrong. He is the factor that united Terminator sect like never before. This is why Terminator sect is strong. You may look at Heavenly Sword Mountain, 10,000 Beast Mountain, Celestial Artifact Sect, and Illusory Demon Sect if you need further proof. They were all silver rank forces, but they're not nearly as united as Terminator sect. The moment something bad happens, dissonance will appear and prevent their sect from uniting their strength or fighting bravely. How can a force like them possibly be Terminator sect's match? And how can they possibly be fearless in face of the ghoul races? Your words makes a lot of sense, sir. Luz stared at Li Mu in praise and surprise before he turned to look at Qin Lai. Your father and your grandfather are also worshipped as gods within the Qin family. The reason the Qin family is as powerful as they were is because their orders are treated as the truth and law of the world. Thank you very much for your guidance, Uncle Li. Qin Lai bowed deeply with bright eyes. Li Mu's teaching had enlightened him greatly. He now understood what lay at the core of a faction's power, why Jiang Zhuzhe was powerful, and why the Terminator sect was a level above all its peers. I can keep Istin in check, but I can't create a giant like that and boost morale of our forces. Luz of the Dark Shadow race looked helpless when he said this. Look at Heavenly Sword Mountain, Celestial Artifact Sect, and 10,000 Beast Mountain. They look like they want to retreat already. Morale is absolutely critical in a battle, Li Mu also said. You need to convince Celestial Artifact Sect, 10,000 Beast Mountain, and Heavenly Sword Mountain that we can beat them and suppress that two old ghouls. Only then they can make up their minds and fight for real. Luz nodded. Otherwise, not only will they probably be useless in battle, they may even lower morale by running away. While saying this, Luz pointed at the evil dragon Calvert and the demon dragon Barrett, chuckling. These two old fellows will definitely take the upper hand over the two ghouls after they reveal their true bodies. Qin Lai's eyes lit up. I have no problems with this. Calvert was the first person to express his support. Lord Barrett, you've purposely come here to make friends with Flaming Sun Island, right? Qin Lai smiled. I need detailed information regarding Dark Shadow World, Barrett said. No problem. Qin Lai grinned. Once this battle is over, I will have the Elder of the Serene Moon Race tell you everything he knows. All right, Barrett nodded. Luz, will you dare fight me? It was at this moment Istin of the Earth Ghoul race taunted them impudently in the airspace of the Setting Sun Islands. Both Fines and him let out a shrill howl that sounded like it could tear the world apart. The moment the shrill howl spread, the giant ghouls that were transformed soul altars abruptly descended like ghouls from abyss towards Grey Island and Flaming Sun Island. It was as if two mountains were crashing towards the ground. The experts on the bigger islands of the Setting Sun Islands only saw two huge shadows in the sky when they looked up. Two terrifying auras that were crawling with eeriness and strangeness rushed towards them like a sea of ice. They only have Luz, and he can't stop both Istin and Fines. Let's see how they survive this battle, Kuyu said excitedly before he waved his hands and yelled. Give me an arrow rain. Ice blue, scarlet red, pitch black, and pure golden flames abruptly flew up from the Eastern Barbarians' camp. The multicolored arrows descended from the sky. The arrow rains were expertly aimed as they flew past Istin and Fines towards Blood Island and the other islands like meteor rains. Flaming Sun Island isn't going to survive this, Gongye of Black Voodoo Cult assessed from inside a cloud. I hope so, Jiang'an said with a dark look on his face. Black Voodoo Cult experts had hidden inside a black cloud using a secret art, prevented others from detecting them. If that Dark Shadow race expert is the only warrior with 5-level soul altar, the voodoo progenitor may not even need to show itself. Istin and Fines alone can take him down, Gongye Qing said. The ghoul races are really powerful. Gongye sighed. Suddenly, Jiang'an pressed a hand glowing with black light to his heart. His heart abruptly stopped beating after the black light enveloped his heart. The Gongye brothers and a couple other Black Voodoo Cult soul altar experts copied him after they saw his movements. Their hearts came to a sudden stop too. We need to force the first voodoo creature to act. Jiang'an's eyes shone murderously as he spoke in a raspy voice. It's fusing faster and faster with the voodoo progenitor. If we give it any more time, we will be manipulated forever. It may be the first voodoo creature, but it still isn't one of us. We cannot allow ourselves to be controlled by a voodoo creature. The Black Voodoo Cult experts all nodded with stern looks on their faces. The reason they used a secret art to stop their hearts was to make the voodoo insects they cultivated with their lives fall into temporary sleep. This was the only way they could stop the voodoo insects that fed on their flesh and soul from listening into their conversation. After the first voodoo creature had taken over the voodoo progenitor's body, it could watch every move they make through the voodoo insects inside their bodies. One could say that all voodoo insect cultivators in Black Voodoo Cult were under the first voodoo creature's thumb right now. The first voodoo creature hasn't truly shared the core of the voodoo progenitor's inheritance because all those who cultivate it can control the voodoo insects. That has been the way of the voodoo progenitor for the longest time. If the voodoo insects turn the tables against us and control us instead, our lives will literally be worse than death. Xianxia's eyes looked bitter and helpless. In the past, we have always been able to sacrifice the voodoo insects and escape from danger. But now, it is the voodoo insects who may sacrifice us while they escape danger and find a new host for themselves. We absolutely mustn't allow the voodoo insects to rule Black Voodoo cult, the Gongya brothers said in unison. Let's hope that Flaming Sun Island can do something about this. Xianxia sighed. The Black Voodoo cult experts stared at Flaming Sun Island with dark and complicated looks in their faces. When the first voodoo creature returned to Black Voodoo cult, they thought that their sect would rise to the top and rule over the land of chaos. However, as the first voodoo creature merged deeper and deeper with the voodoo progenitor, they gradually discovered that it cared nothing for their lives at all. The first voodoo creature seemed to care more for the voodoo insects they cultivated with their lives. The human hosts could die, but not the voodoo insects. In the first voodoo creature's eyes, the voodoo insects were its kin, not them. By the time they realized that the first voodoo creature wasn't the voodoo progenitor, and that it never considered them to be its kin, it was already too late. The first voodoo creature could control the voodoo insects inside their bodies with various secret arts. It could easily deal a grievous blow to their bodies or even kill their souls outright. They had no choice but to obey the first voodoo creature. As of late, the people outside thought that Black Voodoo cult was growing more and more terrifying and conducting themselves in an increasingly bizarre fashion. They thought that it didn't fit with Xianxia's modus operandi too well. They didn't realize that Xianxia had become a puppet after the first voodoo creature had returned. Everything he did was masterminded by the first voodoo creature. He was gradually losing control over Black Voodoo cult. If this situation were to continue any further, Black Voodoo cult would transform into a sect of voodoo insects. Its human cultivators would become flesh and blood puppets controlled by the voodoo insects. This was absolutely not a future Xianxia wanted. Pope, if this battle is won by Flaming Sun Island, and if the first voodoo creature were to perish, where will Black Voodoo cult go next? Gongye suddenly asked. The Black Voodoo cult martial practitioners beside him looked uncertain as well. If Flaming Sun Island wins this fight, and if the first voodoo creature dies in battle, then Black Voodoo cult would certainly become the public enemy of the entire land of chaos. When that happens, Black Voodoo cult might cease to exist altogether. But if Flaming Sun Island was destroyed and the first voodoo creature still lived, they would also lose their final chance of resistance entirely. If that future were to come by, their lives might not be so different from death. Where will Black Voodoo cult go? Xianxia whispered quietly and fell silent for a moment. Finally, he sucked in a deep breath and said, I suppose that we should make preparations beforehand. What should we do? Everyone looked at him. Who among you can contact Flaming Sun Island? Xianxia yelled. Suddenly, his heart throbbed with turbulent activity. The first voodoo creature noticed something amiss already. Xianxia's expression changed as he said hurriedly, Quickly! We need to contact Flaming Sun Island. Help me send a message to Qin Lai right now. Gongye Qin grabbed a sound transmission stone and gritted his teeth. While suppressing the unusual activity in his heart, he said, Please speak, Pope. Tell Qin Lai that Black Voodoo cult is willing to become Flaming Sun Island's vassal force if he can help us kill the first voodoo creature. Xianxia yelled. Pope, don't you think that that's a little too much? Gongye yelled. The soul altar experts of Black Voodoo cult also looked shocked by his decision. They couldn't help but think that his decision was a little excessive. Don't you all realize yet? Flaming Sun Island is not the only force that's standing behind Qin Lai. Xianxia shouted with a distorted expression on his face. Even the gold rank forces of the Central World dare not attack him openly. Instead, they took the roundabout way and hired the Eastern barbarians and the ghoul races to do the deed. The force behind him is the Qin family who once dominated the Central World. And this means that Black Voodoo cult will be attaching themselves to the greatest gold rank force to have ever existed. This is not an unacceptable fate at all, is it? Gongye Qin shuddered before he hastily condensed a wisp of soul consciousness and put it into the sound transmission stone. If Qin Lai were to die today, we will be making a sworn enemy out of the Qin family. We will have no choice but to cling onto the force behind the Eastern barbarians for dear life. That is the only way Black Voodoo cult will be able to survive in the land of chaos. But by then we would have all become the puppets of the voodoo insects. As long as Qin Lai lives to kill the first voodoo creature, we'll be able to free ourselves from it. Thanks to this early message, Flaming Sun Island also won't destroy us after they achieve victory. The only way we can continue to survive at the land of chaos is to submit entirely to Flaming Sun Island. Qin Lai will help explain our circumstances to the other forces after that. In the future, we have no choice but to cling onto the Qin family that's supporting Qin Lai. But at least Black Voodoo cult will still be the master of the voodoo insects. At least we'll be free. The eyes of the Black Voodoo cult experts burned with great desire after they heard Jiang En's words. Boom! A turbulent energy coursed through their chest, and their hearts started beating once more. The strange-looking voodoo insects that clung to their hearts abruptly burst out of their flesh. The voodoo insects that they cultivated with their lives had dark, eerie, and merciless eyes. They whistled shrilly and made threatening gestures at Jiang En and the others. No one among the ashen-faced crowd dared to retaliate against the voodoo insects. After the voodoo insects had whistled for a moment, they began to tear apart the flesh around the human's flesh with their sharp claws. Every soul altar expert, including Jiang En, began to scream in pain. Blood flowed down their chests profusely. Remember, don't pull little tricks like this again. I can sacrifice you and choose a better host for my insects anytime I want to. To me, you humans are only fit as food for us voodoo insects. You lowly souls are unworthy of becoming our masters. The first voodoo creature's voice came from the voodoo insect in Jiang En's chest. That voodoo insect whistled as it tore at Jiang En's muscles and absorbed his refined flesh and blood energy. The light in Jiang En's eyes abruptly dimmed. Floating in midair, the light in Jiang En's eyes faded bit by bit. All around him, the soul altar experts of Black Voodoo cult screamed in pain as the voodoo insects burst out of their chest and fed on their flesh and blood as punishment. Jiang En stared savagely at the giant evil ghouls charging towards the setting sun islands far away from him. A strong desire rose in his heart. He desired for Flaming Sun Island to create a dazzling miracle just like before and severely wound Istin and Fines. I hope that Flaming Sun Island can free us from our bindings, Jiang En thought quietly to himself. Suddenly, the dragon's roars shook the sky above the setting sun islands. Jiang En looked a little more spirited than before. Look! Gongyezhua shouted excitedly. The Black Voodoo cult disciples that were tormented by the voodoo insects ignored the terrible pain around their chest area and stared intently. Two dragons had suddenly soared into the sky where Istin and Fines were while roaring loudly. The giant dragons were about 1,000 meters long. Their gigantic sizes made them look like two clouds perched above a mountain range. Still roaring, the two dragons charged towards Istin and Fines and fired countless dazzling divine beams from their eyes. Jiang En could clearly see the shock in Istin and Fines' eyes even though he was several kilometers away from them. Flaming Sun Island truly deserves its reputation. Jiang En sucked in a deep breath as joy sprung into his eyes. His spirit was suddenly lifted once more. A black dragon and an evil dragon. They're both at rank 9. Heavens! They're obviously stronger than those two ghouls. To think that Flaming Sun Island could invite rank 9 dragons to assist them, after Barrett and Calvert had activated their bloodline powers and took to the air in their true forms, the martial practitioners of all forces immediately exclaimed in shock. The 10,000 Beast Mountain and Celestial Artifact sect martial practitioners, who felt like retreating earlier, suddenly felt full of confidence and itched to fight once more. From this day onwards, Flaming Sun Island is the king of the land of chaos. There are no forces that can overshadow them any longer, Qi Yang said quietly as he looked up into the air with a changed expression on his face. Feng Yi turned around and looked at Luo Han's crowd. Is there anyone else who would like to contest my decision to come to Flaming Sun Island? The dissenters hurriedly shook their heads in embarrassment. At this moment, they all stood on Feng Yi's side and thought that Luo Han was ultimately just an artificer. They thought that he was incapable of providing an accurate suggestion regarding the future of the sect at all. Are there any more objections? Feng Yi snorted coldly. None. The sect master is wise. Someone yelled. Then let's kill them already. Kill every last one of the Eastern barbarians and ghouls. Feng Yi ordered. This time, no celestial artifact sect martial practitioners offered an objection. They unleashed their spirit artifacts and shot down the Eastern barbarians' multicolored arrows. Hey-ho-ho! Barrett roared and twisted its body midair. Lightning coursed throughout his body like weaved fabrics of light. A putrid and black light exited Barrett's mouth like a waterfall. It was mixed with acidic flames, and it hit the face of giant ghoul made from Istin's soul altar immediately. The moment the sticky, black light struck Istin's giant ghoul, black flames immediately started burning on the giant ghoul's body. Istin let out a blood-curdling scream as he watched the refined flesh and blood energy that made up the giant ghoul's body being eroded and burned by acid fire. It's a rank 9 black dragon, Istin shouted. On the other side, the evil dragon Calvert charged straight into Fines and tore at the giant ghoul with its sharp dragon claws. Fines's giant ghoul was turned into a bloody mess as a result. The ashen-faced Fines seemed to be swearing out of his mind as he sat on top of the giant ghoul's head while gripping a bone staff that was entangled by flesh. Calvert hasn't recovered entirely, so he can probably fight Fines to a standstill at most. Luz looked at the sky from Flaming Sun Island, assessing. However, Barrett is at the prime of his life, and his rank 9 bloodline is immeasurably strong. That Istin of the Earth Ghoul race is no match for him at all. At the same time, the multicolored arrow rain fired by the Eastern barbarians was crushed by the allied forces. Xianxia led the blood drinkers to the skies and charged at the Eastern barbarians first. Behind him, the silver rank forces such as Heavenly Sword Mountain and 10,000 Beast Mountain also charged towards their enemies as countless light screens and figures fleeted across the air. They looked like beautiful and colorful meteors. Qinlai was just about to command the 8 god corpses to attack the Eastern barbarians when Song Tingyu rushed over with an odd look on her face. What's wrong? He asked in surprise. Jiang En of the Black Voodoo cult just sent word to us. If we can kill the first voodoo creature, Black Voodoo cult promises to declare themselves as a vassal force of Flaming Sun Island to the entire land of chaos. Song Tingyu said with an odd look on her face. Are you sure the message is authentic? Qinlai was stunned to say the least. For the longest time, Black Voodoo cult was one of the strongest forces of the land of chaos. They were the only silver rank force that dared to taunt and challenge Terminator sect for the throne. Black Voodoo cult was no illusory demon sect. Not only was their pope, Zhang, and a 3-level soul altar expert, the Gongya brothers both had 2-level soul altars as well. Besides that, they were supported by multiple soul altar experts. It was a power that caused headache to all forces. Even Luz, Zhang Zhuzha, and Shueli combined weren't able to deal too much damage to Black Voodoo cult. It showed just how powerful the Black Voodoo cult truly was. If Qinlai were to be frank with himself, he didn't think Flaming Sun Island could beat Black Voodoo cult in a fair fight without borrowing another race's strength. In many ways, Black Voodoo cult was slightly stronger than Flaming Sun Island. That was why Jiang En's abrupt message was so strange to him. He dared not believe it at all. There is no mistake. The message is sent from Black Voodoo cult. We just can't be sure if it is a ploy. Song Tingyu also looked to be in disbelief. According to them, the first voodoo creature had flipped the tables and made the voodoo insects control them ever since it returned to Black Voodoo cult. Jiang En even said that the reason Black Voodoo cult had abstained from participation in the war against the ghoul races at Prism Continent, attacked Illusory Demon Sect, and even worked together with the ghoul races was all because of the first voodoo insect. He was forced to execute all these commands. He no longer had any say whatsoever in Black Voodoo cult. He wishes for us to eliminate the first voodoo insect? Qinlai asked while rubbing his chin. Is that all he demands from us? That is all. Song Tingyu was surprised too. She added, Black Voodoo cult promises to attack the Eastern barbarians, and the ghoul races immediately after the first voodoo insect is dead. Qin Lai grew more and more astonished. After pondering for a moment, he said, I guess we'll know if Jiangyan is telling the truth only after we kill the first voodoo insect. If Black Voodoo cult really attached themselves under Flaming Sun Island, then... Song Tingyu's eyes were very bright. It was obvious that she was very excited. If this is true, then Flaming Sun Island can really become the strongest force in the land of chaos. Black Voodoo cult is not illusory demon sect. The situation is entirely different if they publicly declare their intentions to join us as a vassal force. Qin Lai nodded solemnly. That is true. While saying this, he communicated with the god corpses and spoke with Luz at the same time. Iston and Fines shouldn't be any trouble with those two old dragons keeping them busy. When the voodoo progenitor of Black Voodoo cult shows up later, work together with 10,000 Beast Mountain and do whatever you can to kill the first voodoo insect inside the voodoo progenitor's body. Got it. Luz acknowledged the order. Qin Lai inhaled deeply and flew straight up to the leading god corpse. He released the 8 thunderblits with slabs and began forming the profound thunder heart with lightning. But before he could complete the profound thunder heart, his instinct suddenly flared. He abruptly looked towards the Eastern Barbarians' camp. Above a war chariot shaped like a bird's skeletal wings, San Yi of the Black Barbarian tribe appeared in the body of the arrow god and fired a golden divine arrow at him with the sun-killing bow. The divine arrow seemed to be forged of pure gold. It was covered in mysterious golden patterns and golden lightning. Even though San Yi was very far away from him, the space around him started to tear open and explode as the divine arrow was released. Watch out! Beneath him, Luz looked up and voiced a warning involuntarily. That arrow contains a lot of metallic power, and it is able to disrupt space itself. Make sure you don't get sucked into the chaotic streams of space again. Oh, and watch out for the Heaven Ghoul race, just in case they decide to use the same trick twice. San Yi. Qin Lai raised his head and laughed sinisterly. Cold moons suddenly rose from his shoulders and enshrouded him firmly inside a bright silver screen as he laughed. Crackle! Hundreds of lightning bolts appeared from his palm and condensed into a dazzling ball of thunder instantly. Bang! Above him, another giant lightning ball boomed resoundingly amid the slabs of Thunderblitz wood. Qin Lai's pupils locked onto San Ye's figure firmly. ZZZT. Almost indiscernible to the naked eye, sharp bolts of lightning abruptly zapped towards San Yi from Qin Lai's location. Suddenly, San Yi was flooded by so much lightning that even the arrow god's body was shaking intensely. The arrow god's body didn't seem too damaged despite the attack. However, San Ye's refined soul couldn't claim the same. Gray smoke seeped out of San Ye's pupils as the youth couldn't stop himself from howling in pain. Crack! It was at this moment the space around Qin Lai fell apart as cracks appeared on a moon energy barrier created by Moon Tier. A golden divine arrow exploded into tens of thousands of golden light dots. However, they were all blocked by the cold moon barrier. Yu Yi! Dice that arrow god for me! Qin Lai yelled. The 9 moons that had transformed into the translucent moon tear abruptly flew away after the golden light had faded into nothingness. In the blink of an eye, Moon Tear appeared next to the screaming San Yi and sliced towards the arrow god's body like curved blades of brilliant moonlight. SSSSSSSSSS. The divine artifact Moon Tear easily diced the arrow god's body into many fleshy pieces. No blood seeped out of the chunks of flesh though. It was almost as if they were made of rotten wood. San Ye's soul also split into wisps of smoke that vanished entirely in a short time after a beam of moonlight passed through it. The progenitor's remains have exploded. San Ye's soul is gone. This is bad. A lot of Eastern barbarians screamed involuntarily. The arrow god had been the ancestor of the Eastern barbarians and a hero of the ancient human race. The rumors said he had a 6-level soul altar. With Qin Lai's own strength, without using external help, it would be very hard for him to destroy the remains of the arrow god. San Yi also thought that if his soul was inside the body of the arrow god, Qin Lai could not wound him. But he did not know Qin Lai possessed a divine grade spirit artifact, Moon Tier. This holy artifact of the serene moon race became a divine-grade artifact after being refined by the soul-suppressing orb. It was extremely powerful and could easily mince a body of a former 6th-level soul altar expert. Also, the arrow god was from the human race. He didn't have any powerful ancient bloodline, so his body wasn't particularly sturdy, not to mention the fact that he was dead. The 9 rays of divine light crisscrossed in the air and diced the remains of the arrow god. After extinguishing San Ye's soul, they returned back to Qin Lai's body. The moonlight focused and the 9 bright crescent moons released silver light as they shielded Qin Lai. Bzzien. Suddenly, high-pitched sounds came from behind the eastern barbarians. A patch of inky poisonous miasma floated past the eastern barbarians like thick black clouds. Countless strange beings screamed in the poisonous miasma and pierced people's ears. They caused many martial practitioners of 10,000 Beast Mountain and Heavenly Sword Mountain to fall from the sky. Careful! It is black voodoo cult. Qi Yang's expression darkened. Many of the martial practitioners of 10,000 Beast Mountain heard Qi Yang's warning and immediately channeled the strange spirit art of 10,000 Beast Mountain. Arg! As they bellowed, the martial practitioners of 10,000 Beast Mountain started to bestify with vicious expressions. Their eyes were filled with animalistic savagery. Qi Yang took out an 8-trigram-shaped copper beast token from his spatial ring. That beast token floated up and the beautiful beast patterns carved on the surface gave off faint purple light. Among the light, the shapes of countless ancient beasts appeared and howled. People could not hear those howls, but the voodoo insects hiding in the poisonous miasma released ear-splitting shrieks. Qin Lai looked over and changed expression. He shouted, "They are all voodoo insects!" The poisonous miasma floating like a black cloud suddenly scattered after the ancient beats in the beast token shouted. When the cloud scattered, Qin Lai saw that the black clouds had been made out of innumerable voodoo insects. Various eerie voodoo insects all showed a deep color as they gathered together again. They looked like a black cloud. As the beast token in Qi Yang's hand grew brighter, those black voodoo insects seemed to fiercely struggle. Snap, snap, snap. Some of the weaker voodoo insects were unable to withstand the shouts from the beast token and exploded into powder. "You will die!" A dark, inhuman voice came from the voodoo insects. Then a thin old man in black robes appeared in the middle. Millions of voodoo insects climbed over his body and came in and out of his nose, ears, and mouth. He would suck voodoo insects into his body and then spit them out later. The voodoo insects he sucked in were alive and lively. The ones he spat out were dispirited. Scatter. Consume the flesh and blood of all humans. Spread the voodoo toxin. He spread open his arms. The black voodoo insects scattered like a rainstorm at his order. The martial practitioners of Celestial Artifact Sect and 10,000 Beast Mountain, and even some of the eastern barbarians became targets of the voodoo insects. Those voodoo insects got into their flesh. Once those people were bitten by the voodoo insects, their faces immediately turned blue. It was possible to see small cockroaches in their eyes. These cockroaches had invaded their soul lakes and were consuming their soul power. Such abundant power! Such delicious physical energy! The withered old man howled into the sky, his eyes flashing with black energy as he grew stronger. "Jiang'an, the food you found does not have as much energy as they do. Only powerful humans will quicken my recovery." Behind him, Jiang'an, the Gongya brothers, as well as the experts of Black Voodoo cult, walked out helplessly with bloody chests. Jiang'an and the others had dim eyes, and each of them had a vicious voodoo insect curled up on their chest. The voodoo insects seemed to be the owners of their bodies and led them in front of that old man. "The voodoo progenitor is correct." Jiang'an came over and said with a lowered head, "Only the blood and soul power of experts are abundant in energy. The food we found before cannot compare to the elites of silver rank forces." "Useless. You are all useless." The first voodoo creature's expression was cold as he said, "If you cannot prove to me you still have value, after this battle, I will take my children out of your bodies and choose stronger hosts for them. And you, just like the food, you will be stripped of soul and physical power." When the words were said, Jiang'an and the others had black expressions. They felt their souls turn cold. He should be the first voodoo creature. Luz came over and stood by Qin Lai. He whispered, "It seems that Jiang and is living a fate worse than death. The message he sent may be trustworthy." Qin Lai was about to speak when his expression changed. At this time, the first voodoo creature who had transformed into the voodoo progenitor became excited and said, "Such powerful physical energy." He stared at the 8 god corpses. The 8 god corpses were fighting the Eastern barbarians' ships and birds, as well as unknown soul altar experts under Qin Lai's orders. When the first voodoo creature made the 8 god corpses his target, thousands of voodoo insects flew out of his body. Those voodoo insects had black and bright shells as well as sharp claws. They did not look ordinary. Even more unique was that one could see the light of intelligence in the eyes of those voodoo insects. "Taste the strength of my second-generation voodoo insects." The first voodoo creature pointed at the 8 god corpses and said, "After consuming their flesh, you will transform. In the future, each of you will be able to have a flesh puppet. In the near future, our voodoo insect race will become the race that people fear the most in the world. If we have time to develop, us voodoo insects will not fear even if the god race returns to the land of chaos. And I am your creator, the patriarch of the voodoo insect race, and your god. Soon, all the humans in the land of chaos will become food for us voodoo insects." The first voodoo creature shouted madly. Thousands of black voodoo insects flew out of his body and flooded towards the 8 god corpses. "Qin Lai, the 8 god corpses are enormous. They may not be able to keep the voodoo insects out," Luz shouted. "This first voodoo creature is so ambitious. If the situation develops as he says, the voodoo insects may become a calamity for spirit realm. Qi Yang, you and Luz work together to kill the first voodoo creature," Qin Lai shouted. He sat down amid the 8 slabs of Thunderblitz's wood, his hand holding the demon-sealing tombstone as he dropped some essence blood onto the tombstone. Molten blood art. Volcano eruption. The droplets of his lifeblood essence formed god race characters on the demon-sealing tombstone's surface and then exploded. A strange vibration came from the core of a lonely island to the south of the setting sun islands. As the earth vibrated, a volcano which had been dead for countless years once again gathered lava in its center and gave off strange sounds. A bolt of lightning flashed. Qin Lai suddenly appeared on the volcano's entrance and flew down with the demon-sealing tombstone. Just as the thousands of voodoo insects charged towards the 8 god corpses, Qin Lai and the demon-sealing tombstone shot into the sky from the mouth of the volcano. Furiously gushing magma followed. Divine light formed on the surface of the demon-sealing tombstone. The divine light was a channel that transported the surging lava into the god corpses. Suddenly, the 8 god corpses seemed to be wearing clothes made out of flaming lava. The voodoo insects that reached the god corpses were melted into puddles of blood by the wild lava before they could make a sound. Arg! The first voodoo creature watched as the second generation of voodoo insects turned into blood before they were fully grown and shouted wildly into the sky. The bursts of beast howls from the beast token in Qi Yang's hands did not seem able to suppress it. "Qin Lai, the first voodoo creature has become much stronger in this while," Luz called in shock. "He should be pulling soul and physical power from everyone with the voodoo toxin. They are all helping him grow stronger. Think of a way to destroy the scattered voodoo insects. Otherwise, the first voodoo creature's growth will not stop." Countless voodoo insects howled around the voodoo progenitor like a black sandstorm. They chewed on human martial practitioners, burrowed into their bodies, and afflicted them with voodoo toxin. Each person afflicted with the voodoo toxin had a black and blue face, and the soul shadow of the cockroach could be seen in their eyes. Their life force and soul power quickly left their bodies under the influence of the voodoo toxin. The voodoo progenitor who had been possessed by the first voodoo creature became even more spirited, and the poisonous miasma around him grew thicker. Qi Yang of 10,000 Beast Mountain tried with all his power to activate the strange power in the beast token and focused it all on the voodoo progenitor. However, the voodoo insect who had risen in power only shouted and clawed. Countless voodoo insects fell like black rain from his body. Those voodoo insects gathered in the air and drowned Dark Shadow Race's Luz. Luz's 5-level soul altar was being consumed by the wild voodoo insects. Dark cold light spread from Luz's 5-level soul altar. With each ripple of light, many voodoo insects died, and their minuscule souls were destroyed. However, as soon as one wave was destroyed, another came, drowning Luz's soul altar again. The first voodoo creature seemed to be able to birth new voodoo insects as he grew bigger and absorbed more vitality. He was going to use these newborn voodoo insects to consume Luz's soul altar and use up Luz's strength. At the same time, more second-generation voodoo insects with intelligent eyes flew out of his body and hunted human martial practitioners. Those voodoo insects carried the black voodoo toxin miasma. The Flaming Sun Island and Eastern barbarians that were fighting were all prey for the voodoo insects, and would be infected by the voodoo toxin. Once the voodoo toxin permeated their flesh and soul, the human martial practitioners would become power sources for the first voodoo creature. Affected human practitioners had their soul and energy quickly drained, becoming nothing but withered corpses. Soon, large numbers of corpses started to fall from the sky. The voodoo insects flew out of the corpses, their color even more black, their soul presence even stronger. The little voodoo insects quickly transformed by feeding on fleshly energies and quickly grew strong. Qianlai observed, and his eyes became even more grave. He suddenly shouted, "Qi Yang! Sect Master Feng! Do not fight the Eastern barbarians. Have everyone retreat out of the range of voodoo insect activity. Everyone, leave the voodoo insect area." At the same time, the elder of the Eastern barbarians shouted. The Scarlet Barbarian tribe experts looked viciously at the first voodoo creature. They also realized the first voodoo creature, who had possessed the voodoo progenitor, was too cruel and extreme in his conduct, not thinking anything of human lives. Even they, as allies, were taken over by the voodoo insects in large numbers and became withered corpses. "Voodoo progenitor, what are you doing?" Kuyu cursed. "Have your people stay further away from me. My children will think of all those not of their race as enemies. Their intelligence has not grown enough. They cannot distinguish between friend and foe like I can." The first voodoo creature showed no apology. His eyes flashed with inhuman cold light. "As long as you are 10,000 meters away from me, the voodoo insects will not attack them. Just pay attention to yourselves. You could go kill the blood drinkers of Blood Fiend sect," Kuyu said urgently. "I still have a troublesome opponent to deal with," the first voodoo creature said impatiently. The troublesome enemy he spoke of was Luz of the Dark Shadow Race. Luz was a 5-level soul altar expert. Whenever his nether demonic energy formed a ripple of light, it would cause many voodoo insects to die. Even for him who was constantly growing stronger, it was not easy to defeat Luz. "Qianlai, summon Miao Fengtian." At this time, Luz reminded. Miao Fengtian and his corpse demons will not fear the voodoo insects. Only he can take care of them. Qianlai suddenly reacted. The corpse demons that Miao Fengtian created flowed with great corpse energy and carried corpse toxin. The corpse demons were not living beings. They had no soul. Would the corpse demons with their corpse power fear the voodoo toxin? As they thought this, he immediately sent order to Miao Fengtian mentally to summon him over. On the other side, Miao Fengtian, who was facing the attacks of the black barbarians with Zhang Zhuzha's blood drinkers, saw countless spirit lines appear in his eyes. A thought reached directly into his soul. Miao Fengtian's figure shook. He immediately abandoned his opponent and shrieked. As he shrieked, the corpse demons sat up in their coffins and streamed to where Qianlai was. A pale corpse flashed past, and the corpse progenitor that Miao Fengtian had possessed suddenly appeared next to Luz. "Corpse progenitor!" the first voodoo creature shrieked. Miao Fengtian grinned, the corpse hair trembling as a vast corpse energy swept into the surroundings. Corpse fire and corpse toxin swirled like sand in the wind within the corpse energy. The corpse demons in their coffins flew over and charged into the sky filled with voodoo insects. When the corpse demons arrived, they opened their mouths and sucked the voodoo insects into their stomachs. After the corpse demons swallowed the voodoo insects, they chewed and crushed the voodoo insects. When the voodoo insects entered their stomachs, they found that only white withered flesh was inside. There wasn't any energy they could absorb, and the place was filled with death, ice, and the angry presence of dead souls. The voodoo demons chewed on the flesh of the corpse demons. The corpse demons did not have any pain reactions and were completely immune to voodoo toxins. On the contrary, the voodoo insects that chewed on the flesh of the corpse demons quickly lost their energies. Soon, the voodoo insects swallowed into the corpse demons gradually died. The voodoo insects clearly had no way of defeating the dead corpse demons. When Miao Fengtian came with the crowd of corpse demons into the sky, the voodoo insects started to die in large numbers. The voodoo insects who had killed so many swirled around the voodoo progenitor, but they could not obtain more flesh and soul power for the first voodoo creature. Kill them all. Otherwise, I will have you all die, the first voodoo creature howled. As he shouted, the voodoo insects on the chests of Jiang En and other disciples of Black Voodoo cult started to twist. Jiang En and the others had no way of resisting the first voodoo creature's order. They could only charge to kill the corpse demons. Jiang En himself was ordered by the first voodoo creature to chase Miao Fengtian. Just before he and Miao Fengtian started to fight, he looked at Qin Lai, and his eyes passed on many messages. Qin Lai narrowed his eyes. He thought for a moment and suddenly gave a mental order to Miao Fengtian. Miao Fengtian, who was about to engage Jiang En, shook and looked back at Qin Lai. Under Miao Fengtian's shocked gaze, Qin Lai nodded. Miao Fengtian's shock increased. When did Qin Lai and Jiang En get together? Miao Fengtian was puzzled but could only follow Qin Lai's orders. As he fought Jiang En, he was extremely careful. Originally, Miao Fengtian was not a match for Jiang En. However, after assimilating the body of the corpse progenitor, Miao Fengtian was not at a disadvantage. Other than this, Miao Fengtian also had Pu Zhe and the White-Bone Demon Monarch and many lesser corpse demons. Without Qin Lai's order, Miao Fengtian would have fought at full power and did have the ability to fight Jiang En to a standstill. Oh! The moment Jiang En engaged Miao Fengtian, he also showed shock. He did not know that Miao Fengtian, who had taken over the corpse progenitor, was now a faithful servant of Qin Lai. He did not know that Qin Lai had already sent the order. He only knew that his opponent held back. Jiang En thought for a moment, and then understood, subconsciously looking towards Qin Lai. Qin Lai nodded gently. Jiang En's eyes filled with light and he immediately understood. Then, the battle between him and Miao Fengtian became a friendly match. All kinds of spirit arts were cast and caused spectacular displays, but they maintained equal power where they could not harm each other. Qin Lai floated in the sky, frowning as he looked at the first voodoo creature. In his view, the situation was clear. They could only win this battle if they killed the first voodoo creature. If the first voodoo creature was dead, Luz would be released. The disciples of Black Voodoo cult led by Jiang En would become allies. This would be a fatal blow for the Eastern barbarians and the ghoul races. How to kill the first voodoo creature? He frowned. The first voodoo creature that had seized the voodoo progenitor's body instantly gave birth to tens of thousands of voodoo insects after absorbing the soul, flesh, and blood energy of their enemies. They covered the sky like dark clouds. The sea of voodoo insects kept attacking and tearing at Luz's soul altar, which kept pulsing with dark light, killing them swarm after swarm. However, the voodoo insects were so numerous that their numbers almost seemed infinite. It didn't take long for more voodoo insects to be bred from the voodoo progenitor's soul altar. Luz used up more and more nether demonic energy over time. As time dragged on, the luster of his 5-level soul altar turned dim. Many flying humans were sucked dry and left to fall on the ground like blocks of rotten wood. At first, the first voodoo creature planned to make the voodoo insects feed on more humans. However, after the corpse demons joined the battlefield to replace the martial practitioners moving away from the voodoo progenitor, the voodoo insects suddenly couldn't lock onto a target. The corpse demons had no life or soul. They were the bane of all voodoo insects. The voodoo insects couldn't obtain any nutrition from the corpse demons' bodies at all. On the contrary, not only were the corpse demons unafraid of either the voodoo insects' voodoo toxin or their bites, their aura could even erode voodoo insects' life force. Their presence quickly caused the voodoo insects to die in droves. Not long after, the first voodoo creature ordered the black voodoo cult to participate in the battle. After they rushed to the voodoo progenitor's side and took down the corpse demons, the voodoo insect swarms were freed to spread chaos once more. Spread out. Head to where the humans are. Continue to spread the voodoo toxin. The first voodoo creature howled and sent out a new order to the black sea of voodoo insects. The voodoo insects that had been flying beside it spread out after obtaining their new orders. The silver rank forces, the Eastern barbarians, and even the three ghoul races had become the voodoo insects' prey in the airspace of the setting sun islands. The first voodoo creature was covered by layers upon layers of voodoo insects. It seemed to be birthing new voodoo insects using a strange secret art. The voodoo progenitor's body swelled as black liquid began to pour out of his pores. The black liquid condensed into tiny black dots that wriggled for a time before transforming into many sinister-looking voodoo insects. More voodoo insects had been bred from the voodoo progenitor's body before they left him for someplace else. Every time a voodoo insect whistled away from the voodoo progenitor, it would spread the voodoo toxin. All life forms that didn't have a special secret art to protect themselves would quickly be poisoned upon inhaling any voodoo toxin or after being bit by the voodoo insects. The tiny image of a toad could be seen in every victim's pupils. Their flesh, blood, and soul energy rapidly departed their bodies. The first voodoo creature whistled excitedly as its aura climbed up at a shocking rate again. Even more voodoo insects were bred after it had absorbed a large amount of chi, blood, and soul energy. A sea of voodoo insects quickly flooded Luz in no time. Somewhere deep within the sea of voodoo insects, Luz's 5-level soul altar almost lost all of its luster. Sitting above his soul altar and enshrouded by pitch-black nether demonic energy, Luz's face had turned gray. Qin Lai. Find a way to kill the first voodoo creature. As long as it's alive, it can absorb flesh, blood, and soul energy to breed an unlimited amount of voodoo insects. The voodoo toxin spread by these voodoo insects also allows it to drain even more energy from these human warriors. It's practically invincible like this, Luz yelled. Even the two dragons, Barrett and Calvert, were alarmed by this. The two giant ghouls manifested from the old ghouls' soul altars were completely suppressed by them. They were not a match for them at all. That was why they were calm all this time. However, two clumps of the spreading black sea that were the voodoo insects had actually treated the two dragons as targets. The 1,000-meter-long demon dragon and evil dragon quickly noticed that several thousands voodoo insects had crashed into their bodies while they were still fighting. These voodoo insects were extremely tiny. Therefore, they were able to pass through their dragon scales easily and feed on the flesh beneath it. The moment the old rank 9 dragons were bitten by the voodoo insects, even they could sense their flesh and blood energy being absorbed. These damnable things! Barrett roared as black flames suddenly rose from his entire body. It then spat a mouthful of acidic breath straight onto the infected flesh. Thousands of voodoo insects were either burned to dust by dragon flames or melted by his acidic breath. The evil dragon Calvert also roared angrily, his body turned as firm as iron. An evil energy that was violent, bloodthirsty, and ruthless gushed out of his pores. The voodoo insects on its body were killed too. The rank 9 Barrett and Calvert had managed to kill the voodoo insects instantly after they got angry. The dragon race was one of the races with the strongest physical bodies in the vast galaxies. Their race had many subraces, and their breaths were incredibly toxic. That was why they were immune to many kind of toxins. The voodoo toxin was obviously among the toxins that they were immune to. Both humans and ghouls were poisoned by the voodoo toxin after they were bitten by the voodoo insects. Even the 5-level soul altar expert Luz was extremely wary of it. The two old dragons continued to chase after Iston and Fines while looking very lively. They didn't appear to be affected by the voodoo toxin at all. As expected of the dragons that are famed for the strength of their physical bodies among the powerful ancient races. To think that the second-generation voodoo insects are unable to afflict them with the voodoo toxin. Standing at the center of the sea of voodoo insects, the Viridian blood-toad soul figure could be seen clearly in the pupils of the voodoo progenitor. It had noticed Barrett and Calvert from the beginning. It could sense a great amount of flesh and blood energy inside their bodies that even it deemed terrifying. The reason it had chosen to attack the 8 god corpses first instead of Barrett and Calvert was because it wasn't certain that the voodoo toxin could be injected into their bodies. At first, it was hoping to corrupt the 8 god corpses using the second-generation voodoo insects first so they could complete a new cycle of evolution. Only then would it urge the evolved second-generation voodoo insects to attack the 2 old dragons. If the 8 god corpses, 2 evil dragons, tens of thousands of humans, and the experts of the ghoul races were all consumed by the voodoo insects, its fusion with the voodoo progenitor would become near perfect. The second-generation voodoo insects it nurtured would also complete their evolution and become the core force of the voodoo insect race. Once it had digested all these lives, it could turn every living being in the land of chaos into its food. The voodoo insect race would be able to establish its race's first foundation after feeding on the entire land of chaos. When that happens, it would become the voodoo god and the creator of the voodoo insect race. An entirely new race would have been born from the land of chaos. Unfortunately, the 8 god corpses were suddenly covered in divine clothes of lava. As a result, every second-generation voodoo insect was melted before it could evolve. As expected, the second-generation voodoo insects failed to inject the voodoo toxin into the 2 dragons because they hadn't completed their cycle of evolution. In fact, they were completely crushed by the dragon's latent abilities. First voodoo creature's perfect plan failed just like that. No! The second-generation voodoo insects can infect the dragons with voodoo toxin only if they complete their evolution. And here the 8 god corpses are the only things that can supply them with enough flesh and blood energy to do so. The Viridian blood toad thought as it observed the battle situation through the voodoo progenitor's pupils. He abruptly looked towards Qin Lai. This is the weak being that caused the 8 god corpses to be covered in burning lava. This is the culprit that thwarted the plan to complete second-generation voodoo insects' evolution through these flesh puppets. It immediately made up its mind to kill Qin Lai first. This was so that the 8 god corpses couldn't cover themselves in lava for an extended period of time. It looked at Qin Lai. At the same time, Qin Lai, who was trying to think of a way to kill the first voodoo creature with all his might, suddenly felt chills all over. Qin Lai noticed that the first voodoo creature was looking at him with eyes that were completely devoid of human emotion. The man and the insect stared at each other. They both read the killing intent that was practically bursting out of their eyes. Ha! A human boy who's not even strong enough to make an impact on this battlefield wants to kill me? What a joke! The first voodoo creature thought to itself as it sent down an order. Suddenly, tens of thousands of voodoo insects moved away from the first voodoo creature and swarmed towards Qin Lai. Watch out, Qin Lai! Luz screamed a warning. The first voodoo creature is stronger than we initially imagined. I can't hold him down any longer. You can't let yourself be infected by the voodoo toxin no matter what. Qi Yang of 10,000 Beast Mountain also warned from afar. Qin Lai snorted coldly before he stretched out a finger. The demon-sealing tombstone immediately rose to the top of his head. The burning lava that was sucked into the demon-sealing tombstone from the heart of a volcano immediately wrapped around him like protective armor as he executed the molten blood art. Can the ancient spirit diagram restrict this voodoo insect? Suddenly, he recalled the time he inscribed a boundary-breaker ancient spirit diagram using his refined blood and successfully broke through Xianxia's world of darkness, while he was exploring the secret realm inside the chaotic streams of space. A wisp of his soul thought entered the soul-suppressing orb and swept through the giant web made up of an infinite amount of spirit diagrams. Then his spirits rose. Spirit sealing ancient diagram. His lifeblood essences immediately flew out of his body like translucent blood diamonds. Guided by his soul, they drew an exquisite and complicated compound ancient spirit diagram across his body. The heart of the spirit diagram was the spirit-sealing spirit diagram. 15 seconds later, he was entirely naked. A mysterious and ancient compound spirit diagram made with his blood was drawn across his body. Still wrapped inside burning lava, he pressed his left hand to his heart, where the core of the spirit-sealing spirit diagram lay. It was a hub of the ancient spirit diagram and a concentrated spot of lifeblood essences. He abruptly looked at the voodoo progenitor surrounded by voodoo insects. Blitz thunder escape. ZZZT. A flash of lightning later, he suddenly appeared inside the sea of voodoo insects. Crackle! The burning lava and countless thunderous explosions destroyed the voodoo insects around. The mysterious lines of blood on his body wriggled like worms or spirit snakes. 3 different types of divine characters appeared from the blood threads that were as thin as hair. Spirit sealing. Qianlai yelled. Bang! A dazzling flash of blood spread out and turned into a mysterious magnetic field all of a sudden. He fixed his stare at the voodoo progenitor and never looked away. When the path of bloody light burning with divine flames came into contact with the voodoo progenitor, the viridian blood toad inside the voodoo progenitor's pupils suddenly began struggling in fear. Countless nameless threads and mysterious characters transformed into physical laws that seemed to contain the absolute truth of the world. As a result, the many divine energies pulled the viridian blood toad out of the voodoo progenitor's soul altar. The first voodoo creature was pulled out bit by bit through the voodoo progenitor's chest by the path of bloody light. The viridian blood toad's soul shadow faded gradually from the voodoo progenitor's pupils. The first voodoo creature shrilled and used seemingly all of its power to break free. However, it wasn't able to struggle loose from the spirit-sealing ancient diagram's restriction and law in the end. Finally, the first voodoo creature was completely extracted and exposed under the path of bloody light entirely. Every single voodoo insect in the sky let out a blood-curdling scream at once and flew back towards the first voodoo creature. They rushed towards Qianlai like giant clouds. The human martial practitioners who were going through hell because of the voodoo insects looked overjoyed when the bugs suddenly moved away from them. Even Luz was about to run out of power because of the endless waves of voodoo insects. Everyone was freed from the shadow of the voodoo insects after the bugs rushed back towards the voodoo progenitor. When they looked in the direction voodoo insects were flying towards, their gazes fell on Qianlai. This is... Luz stared at Qianlai and the voodoo insect that was extracted from the voodoo progenitor's body in astonishment. The first voodoo creature could only execute the voodoo progenitor's evil secret arts when it was inside his 7-level soul altar. It was scary only because it had merged with the voodoo progenitor's soul altar. That was how it managed to control the experts of black voodoo cult. Now that the first voodoo creature was forced out of the voodoo progenitor's remains, everyone realized that it was an opportunity to finally kill the first voodoo creature. Qianlai, please kill it. From here on, black voodoo cult is willing to serve Flaming Sun Island as a vassal force. Jiang and abandoned Miao Fengtian at first notice and charged towards Qianlai and the first voodoo creature with everything he got. The Gongya brothers and the soul altar experts of black voodoo cult were also shouting in excitement as flying over. While hooting, they also pierced their own chests with their claw-like fingers. The personal voodoo insects that had entrenched themselves inside their hearts and fed on their flesh and blood let out ear-piercing screams when they were forcefully pulled out by the soul altar experts. Without the first voodoo creature to execute the secret arts of voodoo progenitor, these voodoo insects seemed incapable of threatening Jiang En and the others any longer. Similarly, since they were directly connected to each other by flesh, Jiang En and his people could only torture the voodoo insects. They would have been injured if they killed the voodoo insects. I'll help you kill it. Luz of the Dark Shadow race also dashed over as soon as he was freed from the endless waves of voodoo insects. Even Miao Fengtian was rushing over with 2 corpse demons to aid Qianlai in killing the first voodoo creature. Everyone knew how scary the first voodoo creature was. They knew that this was the best time to kill it. No one wanted to let go of this golden opportunity. You will die, Jiang En. Every one of you is going to die. The first voodoo creature continued to threaten them verbally as it whistled shrilly inside the ray of bloody light. Unfortunately for it, the spirit-sealing power inside the bloody light was transforming into invisible blood threads that bound the viridian blood toad by the second. By the time it moved towards Qianlai, it was entangled in countless blood threads already. It didn't take long before the viridian blood toad that was only as big as Qianlai's fist was fully bound and presented right in front of him. Still, the viridian blood toad's tiny, dark green eyes were glinting coldly as it struggled with everything it got. There's no need, Qianlai yelled. Senior Luz, Miao Fengtian, protect me and make sure that black voodoo cult doesn't get near. Luz was about to kill the first voodoo creature, so the sudden request caught him off guard. But why? Just trust me, Qianlai yelled. All right. Luz didn't hesitate or ask any unnecessary questions. He suddenly created a barrier of nether demonic energy around him. Many strange plants created from pure nether demonic energy swayed beside Luz, as they spread even more nether demonic energy to the surroundings. Miao Fengtian had also set Pu Zhe and the white-boned demon monarch loose and ensured that no one could get close to Qianlai. What are you doing, Island Master Qin? Please kill that voodoo insect as soon as possible. When Jiang'an arrived and was stopped by Luz and Miao Fengtian's restrictions, he couldn't help but stare at Qianlai and especially that tiny viridian blood toad with terrible shock and fear. He was very afraid that the first voodoo creature would return to the voodoo progenitor's body and activate the voodoo insects inside their chests. He was afraid that they would be killed on the spot. That was why they had rushed over at top speed the second the first voodoo creature was extracted from the voodoo progenitor's body. It was a do-or-die gamble. They had to kill the first voodoo creature before it returned to the voodoo progenitor's body. Otherwise, it would kill all of them. Jiang'an and the other black voodoo cult members couldn't even begin to describe how anxious they were when they saw Qianlai extracting the first voodoo creature from the voodoo progenitor's body through an extraordinary method, but chose not to kill it immediately. In fact, he even asked Luz and Miao Fengtian to stop them from approaching him. Don't worry, it cannot escape. You don't have to worry about your lives too. Qianlai yelled loudly. Then, he focused his thoughts on the first voodoo creature. Oh! The first voodoo creature whistled at even higher pitch as it secreted green voodoo poison from its body. It was trying to erode the dense blood threads that had bound its body. However, for some reason the extremely corrosive voodoo poison didn't work on Qianlai's blood threads at all. My lifeblood essence contains the silver streak heavenly snake's latent ability, corrosion. Your voodoo poison is likely ineffective against the spirit-sealing ancient diagram I made with my blood. Qianlai grinned and let out a chuckle. Then he mumbled to himself, spirit sealing, I will need a vessel to seal this thing. A vessel. As he said this, he took out the Thunder Soul Blade, Astral Thunder Hammer, and a couple other random spirit artifacts. Get in! He urged his bloodline powers and tried to complete the final step of the spirit sealing process. First, he injected a ball of bloody light into the viridian blood toad's body. The blood threads abruptly brightened up in response, turned the toad into a ball of greenish light and dragged it into the Thunder Soul Blade. Bang! The Thunder Soul Blade, an Earth Grade 6 spirit artifact, instantly exploded the second it was touched by the green light. Qianlai was shocked. The Thunder Astral Hammer and the random spirit artifacts he took out had also exploded immediately after coming into contact with the viridian blood toad. 6 to 7 spirit artifacts had been destroyed as a result. The grade of the vessels you chose are too poor. They cannot endure the viridian blood toad's soul. Quickly, find a vessel of higher grade as soon as you can. Yu Ye's voice suddenly rang in Qianlai's mind. As an artifact soul, he noticed that the problem lay in the strength of the viridian blood toad's soul and the grade of Qianlai's chosen vessels. The vessels are too poor, the vessels are too poor. Even Qianlai had grown anxious as the green light wobbled more and more rapidly as if it would explode at any moment. He hastily grabbed a couple more spirit artifacts from his spatial ring. The spirit artifacts he chose were mostly spoils he had gotten from the young experts back at the chaotic streams of space. Some of these spirit artifacts had reached heaven grade. Bang, bang, bang. But even these spirit artifacts had been shattered by the greenish sphere. Qianlai's face had distorted as a result. Use the Venerable One's wooden sculpture. It was at this moment that Luz's urgent shout was heard. He had been observing Qianlai's actions all this time. The Venerable One's wooden sculpture will definitely work. Qianlai followed Luz's suggestion and hurriedly took out the wooden sculpture that was sculpted in his grandfather's image. The greenish ball, the first voodoo creature's soul, had turned into fused with the wooden sculpture. Whoosh! The green light flowed into the wooden sculpture like water, and silence suddenly returned to the world. The soul of the first voodoo creature turned into a green river of light that merged completely into the wooden sculpture. In that moment, the voodoo insects from all over wailed sharply. Their wails were followed by sudden explosions, their dark green souls streaming to the wooden sculpture in Qianlai's hand. The eyes of many disciples of black voodoo cult regained clarity and luster. The voodoo insects coiled inside their chests suddenly became docile after the Viridian blood toad was sealed into the wooden sculpture. Their souls, which had almost been tempted into madness by the first voodoo creature, gradually calmed. The flesh and blood power of their hosts started to nourish their bodies once again. As the Pope of Black Voodoo cult, Xianxia detected this immediately. The feeling of being one with the voodoo insect came back. The voodoo insects they fed with their flesh and soul energies were like parts of them. They had always treated the voodoo insects in their bodies like a second life. Obviously, those voodoo insects were completely obedient to them. When the first voodoo creature returned from the graveyard of gods and merged into the voodoo progenitor, everything changed. The first voodoo creature used the body of the voodoo progenitor and controlled the voodoo insects in their bodies. This caused the voodoo insects who they nurtured with their flesh and soul energies to go out of their control. Voodoo insects controlling people. They could not accept this. In this moment, as the first voodoo creature left the body of the voodoo progenitor and was sealed away, all the hostility was gone. Xianxia and the others felt joy as if they had come back to life. Those who wanted to breach the barriers created by Luz and Miao Fengtian in order to reach Qianlai and kill the first voodoo creature also calmed down. Luz stared at them. When he saw them put down their weapons, he also let down his guard. Qianlai, the first voodoo creature, you sealed it into the wooden sculpture? He asked. Xianxia and Miao Fengtian naturally came over as well. They noticed the sea of voodoo insect next to Qianlai explode, turning into dark green wisps of smoke that entered the wooden sculpture. The wooden sculpture was surrounded by circles of green light as it gave off strange ripples. It easily absorbed the green souls. Shortly after, the wooden sculpture was covered in green, looking like dry wood in spring, about to bud. A strong vitality gushed out of the wooden sculpture. Qianlai also had an astounded expression. Holding the wooden sculpture, he probed with his mind. He found the Viridian blood toad was restrained by many bloodlines in a complex ancient diagram of the wooden sculpture as it fiercely struggled. On the wooden sculpture, the many wondrous and natural wood grains were slowly moving. When the voodoo insects exploded, the soul fragments they had been created with were absorbed by the wooden sculpture, strengthening the already abundant vitality. That wooden sculpture immediately came to life like a dry river suddenly filling with water. As the vitality of the wooden sculpture increased, the compound spirit diagram inside gradually showed its wonders. The first voodoo creature became weaker as it struggled in the wooden sculpture. At this time, Qianlai retracted his mind consciousness and focused once again on the outside world. He said to Luz, "The first voodoo creature has been sealed." When he said this, the eyes of Xianxia and the disciples of Black Voodoo cult lit up. "Island Master Qin, will he really not return?" Xianxia asked. "Temporarily not," Qianlai said ambiguously. "Only temporarily?" Xianxia's expression changed slightly. "You cannot completely refine him to death?" The Black Voodoo cult martial practitioners became nervous, their expressions serious. "Maybe he will return. But at that time, he should be under my absolute control." Qianlai grinned. "Your control?" Surprise flashed through Xianxia's eyes. He thought for a while and nodded with bitterness, saying, "I understand." Pausing, he suddenly took a deep breath and awkwardly bowed to Qianlai. He said with a lowered head, "Is there anything I can do for Island Master Qin right now?" Because the first voodoo creature was sealed, the martial practitioners of 10,000 Beast Mountain, Celestial Artifact Sect, and the other silver rank forces gathered over. Qiyang, Fengyi, Luohan, and the others were also paying attention. At this moment, the martial practitioners gathered stared in shock as Xianxia bowed towards Qianlai. The Pope of Black Voodoo cult was bowing to Qianlai, and that bow was clearly one of a subordinate expressing surrender to their superior. "According to our previous agreement, Black Voodoo cult has to pursue and kill the ghoul races and the Eastern barbarians," Qianlai said coolly. Xianxia nodded respectfully and ordered his subordinates, Did you hear Island Master Qin's orders? The Gongya brothers and the countless black voodoo cult soul altar experts responded loudly. What is going on? Qi Yang and Feng Yi looked at each other, stunned. They felt this was not realistic. Even Jiang Zhuzhe, Mo Lingye, Yu Lingwei, and the others had shocked expressions. Starting today, Black Voodoo Cult will join Flaming Sun Island and swear loyalty to Island Master Qin. Under the shocked and uncertain gazes, Jiang floated into the sky and said loudly. Then, he immediately led the Gongya brothers and other Black Voodoo Cult soul altar experts to show their sincerity. Pursuing the Eastern barbarians. Do not worry about me. Try to kill as many of the ghouls as possible. As long as ghoul races are alive, we will not know peace. Qin Lai smiled faintly at Luz. All right, Luz, Miao Fengtian, and the corpse demons charged towards the ghoul races. Sect masters, you do not have to worry about Black Voodoo Cult and the Voodoo Insect. Just go and kill Eastern barbarians. Qin Lai looked at Qi Yang, Feng Yi, and the others. Those people nodded dazedly, filled with all kinds of doubts, as they started to slaughter the Eastern barbarians. The unclear situation suddenly became clear with the sudden sealing of the first voodoo creature and the Black Voodoo Cult's rebellion. Qin Lai first put away the wooden sculpture and then looked at the remains of the voodoo progenitor. After thinking for a while, he reached to point at his brow. The soul-suppressing orb appeared. A curtain of light covered the body of the voodoo progenitor and pulled it into the bead. After I refine it, I can give the voodoo progenitor's remains back to Jiang En. At that time, Jiang En will be tied to Flaming Sun Island. Qin Lai thought. With the past refinements of the blood and corpse progenitors' bodies, he was sure the soul-suppressing orb could refine the remains of the 5 progenitors into golems similar to corpse servants. The bodies of the 5 progenitors, after the soul-suppressing orb's refinement, could be merged with souls of similar types. However, he could control those who assimilated the remains. After the first voodoo creature flew out, the body of the voodoo progenitor was but a corpse. He did not believe Jiang and could resist the temptation of a 7-level soul altar. Quickly leave the setting sun islands. Leader of the Black Barbarian tribe, Kuyu, saw Jiang En and the Black Voodoo Cult disciples charging, and his expression changed. Istin and Fines of the 3 ghoul races were bloodied and wounded by the 2 old dragons as their soul altars had been transformed into giant ghoul warriors. Standing on the giants' heads, Fines and Istin were dispirited as black energy dissipated from their eyes. Those black wisps seemed to be their soul. Luz is coming. Istin of the Earth Ghoul race saw a vast cloud of nether demonic energy coming and panicked. Barrett and Calvert held huge advantage over them. The reason they were still trying to hang on was because they knew first voodoo creature was a significant variable. They hoped the first voodoo creature could turn the tide of the battle. Qin Lai sealed the first voodoo creature, the Black Voodoo Cult joined enemy's camp, and Luz was released. This caused the fighting power of the 2 sides to become extremely unequal. Istin realized they had already lost this battle. Seeing Istin's expression change, Fines of the Blue Ghoul race could guess his thoughts. The 2 old ghouls exchanged a look, their bodies sinking and disappearing into the giant ghoul warriors. The enormous ghoul warriors shrunk rapidly and returned to the form of soul altars. Having recovered their original appearance, they seemed extremely unremarkable compared to the bodies of Barrett and Calvert. Barrett did not react in time as the 2 ghoul soul altars flew towards the east. On the eastern horizon, a group of Heaven Ghoul clansmen gathered. Big spatial cracks appeared. The cracks continued to expand. They quickly formed a narrow spatial rift. Buddha's figure silently appeared in that rift. Retreat to the chaotic streams of space. The 3 ghoul races clansmen heard the call for retreat and cast their secret arts. Like rays of light and darkness, the ghouls flew towards the spatial rift. Poof! Mangled limbs and bones fell from the sky, creating a bloody rain. The ghouls are crippling themselves to escape, Barrett shouted angrily. At this time, Xianxia, who was fighting against a 3-level soul altar Eastern barbarian, suddenly flashed, his eyes cold. Xianxia's shoulder-length silver hair suddenly danced. The bright silver strands of hair seemed to stab into space itself. Everyone saw astounding light coming out of his hair. A strange power rippled out of his body, causing the spatial cracks to stop expanding. The spatial rift the experts of Heaven Ghoul race had made started to heal as Xianxia's domain spread. Inside the spatial rift, Budo's face twisted as he seemed to howl wildly. The Heaven Ghoul clansman behind Budo started exploding. The blood sprayed onto Budo, completely covering him. His eyes were filled with endless viciousness. After being struck by the heavenly blood divine beam, his bloodline power was restrained, and he couldn't utilize Heaven Ghoul race's latent abilities and racial traits. The spatial rift which appeared was created by him using the bloodline power of ghouls behind him. Xianxia's ability to free space forced him to activate all the power in the bloodline, and caused the other clansmen to explode. So many Heaven Ghoul clansmen dying made him fume with hatred towards Xianxia. He made sure to imprint Xianxia's face into his soul. In the future, when I recover, I will slaughter all the living beings in the land of chaos. Not even animals will be spared. Inside the gradually healing spatial rift, Budo, covered in blood, gave off a ghastly curse. All the martial practitioners who heard his shout felt chills. They looked towards the bloody shadow of Budo behind the spatial rift. Boom! Behind Budo, more Heaven Ghoul clansmen exploded into bloody bits, and seemed to strengthen his rage even further. Pew! Xianxia sprayed out a mouthful of blood, his silver hair suddenly turning white. Kill as many ghouls as possible, Qianlai shouted. Suddenly, all the martial practitioners stopped their pursuit after the Eastern barbarians and targeted the ghouls that were trying to leave using secret arts. Do all you can to block that spatial rift. Do not let more clansmen of the three ghoul races escape again, Su Ran of Terminator sect shouted. Spatial spirit artifacts. Who has spatial spirit artifacts? Zhang Zhuzha shouted. Spatial spirit artifacts. Qianlai was shocked. He suddenly thought of the Heaven Gold Mirror. Within the chaotic streams of space, he had once wreaked havoc in the battle for the spatial passageway by using the spirits of void and chaos. Ji had taken out the Heaven Gold Mirror and recovered order by smoothing the chaotic spatial laws of the place. He seemed to have created entirely new space around him. The appearance of the Heaven Gold Mirror caused the spirits of void and chaos to become unable to use the spatial whirlpools that had been present everywhere, and he had almost been seriously injured. He had an unusually deep impression of the Heaven Gold Mirror. At this time, seeing that Xianxia was unable to overpower the many Heaven Ghoul clansmen working together, he knew that no one could reverse the situation. I hope this will be of use. He threw out the Heaven Gold Mirror. A bright copper mirror flew towards the ghouls. When the Heaven Gold Mirror appeared, it released mysterious power capable of mending the spatial laws. Even though the mirror was still far from the spatial rift, it started to tremble violently. In a moment, Budo, covered in blood, suddenly exploded. Everyone saw a remnant soul fly out of Budo's body and disappear. Great sage! Inside and outside the spatial rift, Heaven Ghoul clansmen all let out pained wails. At that moment, the spatial rift was forcibly healed. Aside from Istin and Fines, no other ghoul race's clansmen managed to reach it. Nearly 3,000 ghouls, with their broken limbs and blood-covered bodies, stared in hopelessness at the space where a spatial rift should have been. The martial practitioners of the major silver rank forces surrounded the area. The sound of spirit artifacts cutting through bone and the hair-raising screams of the ghoul race's clansmen spread from the area. The human experts who hated the three ghoul races felt no pity. They killed all the remaining ghouls who had not fled into the chaotic streams of space. The martial practitioners of the eastern barbarian tribes used this opportunity to flee like dogs towards the east. Among them was one man that looked like nothing like black barbarians, yet wore their robes. That thing, isn't that the G family's Heaven Gold Mirror? A short-bearded, middle-aged martial practitioner's eyes flashed with strange light as he said in a low voice, "It definitely is the Heaven Gold Mirror of Ji." The other person said certainly. Only the Heaven Gold Mirror's presence can cause the space to recover its laws and heal a spatial rift like that one. The Heaven Gold Mirror has always been in Ji-Chi's possession. and Ji-Chi and the other fragmentation realm youths of the gold rank forces in Central World all died in the chaotic streams of space. All of them entered and searched for the secret realm of the god race. None returned. The short-bearded, middle-aged martial practitioner had a serious expression. No one knows what happened in there. Even the ancient races seemed to be cautious and confused. Ji-Chi died there. His heaven gold mirror must have been left there. For this Qin Lai to have it, he must have been there earlier. He had originally been pulled into the chaotic streams of space by the heaven ghoul race, that person said in shock. He must have something to do with the deaths of gold rank forces younger generation geniuses, even if he didn't kill them himself, the short-bearded martial practitioner said coldly. It must be like this. I will immediately report this. Has the god race's bloodline, he is also called Qin Lai, he must be Qin Hao's son, the boy from 3 centuries ago. We can return and report to Miss Han Qian. Yes, they chatted as they fled in the chaos, soon disappearing without a trace. The silver rank forces were not in a hurry to chase after Eastern barbarians and kept exterminating the ghoul races. They knew where the Eastern barbarians lived after all. They weren't in a hurry to kill them either. Qin Lai, who had released the heaven gold mirror, felt reassured when he saw the spatial rift heal and the martial practitioners starting slaughtering the ghoul race's clansmen. He hurried to Duan Xianxia's side. Uncle Duan, are you all right? He shouted from a distance. Duan Xianxia's silver hair had turned gray-white in this short period of time. Qin Lai came over and saw the hair, which seemed to be rooted in space, explode into dust. The handsome Duan Xianxia suddenly seemed to age by decades. Minor matter, I just used too much energy. I need some time to recover. Duan Xianxia shook his head. His expression changed and he said, What kind of spirit artifact is this copper mirror you use to heal space? This is heaven gold mirror. Qin Lai handed the copper mirror to Duan Xianxia. Duan Xianxia held the heaven gold mirror, his fingertip glittering with light as it moved across the mirror surface. His eyes suddenly lit up. His shoulders shook as he shouted, Could you lend this to me to study for a while? Qin Lai frowned slightly. Duan Xianxia showed a disappointed expression. You can say if it is not convenient. When he saw Qin Lai for the first time, he taught the other the limit sublimation art. While he was never truly kind to Qin Lai, he always appeared when Qin Lai was in danger. When he gave the limit sublimation art to Qin Lai, in his mind, he already didn't consider Qin Lai an outsider. In contrast to his cold appearance, he had a warm heart. He was just not good at showing emotions. He could see the heaven gold mirror was an extraordinary spatial spirit artifact. It would be of great help to him in mastering the power of space. He knew the value of such an item, so he only wanted to study it for a while. He didn't expect Qin Lai to be dissatisfied with his request. He was greatly disappointed and felt that the hopes he put on Qin Lai were laughable. Uncle Duan, do not misunderstand. At this time, Qin Lai grimaced. He did not go to take the heaven gold mirror Duan Xianxia held towards him and explained sincerely. The reason I am conflicted is not because I am reluctant, but this is a stolen item. It is an artifact belonging to the Ji family in Central World. I'm afraid this item will bring calamity to Uncle Duan. So that's how it is. Duan Xianxia's expression eased and he said, Then I will do my best not to show this item. All right. Qin Lai smiled and said, This item is actually completely useless to me. Since Uncle Duan likes it, I will give it to you. Duan Xianxia stilled and then looked deeply at Qin Lai. He nodded and did not say anything else. After the first voodoo creature was imprisoned, every last ghoul on the battlefield was slaughtered. The martial practitioners of the silver rank forces then changed targets and began hunting down the fleeing Eastern barbarians. After the Eastern barbarians retreated from the Setting Sun Islands, they spread out towards the east, not daring to stay even a second longer. Led by Flaming Sun Island, the experts of the Land of Chaos departed from the Heavenly Slaughter continent and moved towards the east where the Eastern barbarians lived. This time they would eliminate the Eastern barbarians once and for all. Seeing that the victor had been decided, Luz and other Dark Shadow clansmen joined Horned Demon clansmen and returned to the Nether continent through Soul Summoning Island's teleportation formation. The two old dragons Barrett and Calvert also returned to Baluo Realm to prepare for the inevitable return of Lunar Temple and Sun Palace. Every silver rank force in the Land of Chaos united as one and officially launched their invasion on the Eastern Barbarians' homeland. Qin Lai didn't join the main force that was attacking the Eastern Barbarian tribes. Instead, he delegated the task to Li Mu and Lei Yen before returning to Soul Summoning Island sneakily on his own. At the Obsidian Palace of Soul Summoning Island, a spatial entrance connecting to Baluo Realm was wide open. It didn't take long for the rank 9 vermilion bird Tong Yen to pass through the spatial entrance. Su Ran and Tong Jinjin had kept Qin Lai company as they awaited Tong Yen together. Has Barrett and Calvert killed the ghoul experts? The rank 9 vermilion bird asked carelessly upon arrival. Has your situation stabilized already? For now, I believe so, Qin Lai said. Are Lunar Temple and Sun Palace really going to show up and rebuild the secret realm entrances to Baluo Realm in 10 years? Tong Yen asked again. One of the reasons she came today was to personally confirm this information. The second reason was to accompany Tong Zhenjin to the Nether Continent through the spatial passageway of Soul Summoning Island. Many vermilion birds had already gathered near Blue Flame Manor, so they might take revenge on Blue Flame Manor and reclaim the vermilion bird realm. Barring any surprises, yes, Lunar Temple and Sun Palace will reconnect with Baluo Realm in 10 years, Qin Lai said seriously. Moreover, Lunar Temple and Sun Palace aren't going to play games with you any longer. Their first goal upon arrival is to clear out all non-human living beings in Baluo Realm. From what I heard, Lunar Temple and Sun Palace had reached a tacit agreement to transform Baluo Realm into their private realm completely. They won't allow any dissenting voices to appear any longer. 10 years, the rank 9 vermilion bird said with a heavy heart. When Qin Lai had destroyed Sun Palace and Lunar Temple's secret realm entrances at Baluo Realm, they thought that the ancient beast race, black jail race, and giant race finally had their chance to rise to power. By trading with Flaming Sun Island, they were able to acquire many cultivation resources they were lacking and upgrade their overall strength swiftly as a result. They had thought that they would be able to gather enough strength to fight Lunar Temple and Sun Palace head on 100 years later. They were full of confidence about their future, but they never imagined that the 100 years buffer they should have had was suddenly shortened to just 10 years. They didn't think that Lunar Temple and Sun Palace's martial practitioners would be able to shorten their travel time by passing through Kuanhuan Domain. 10 years were as short as a blink of an eye. There was no way they could bring their strength to a whole new level in just 10 years. 10 years. There's not enough time. I doubt that we can gather enough strength to fight Lunar Temple and Sun Palace in just 10 years' time, the rank 9 vermilion bird said worriedly. If it really is impossible, should we return to Vermilion Bird Realm when the time comes? Tong Jinjin asked. The rank 9 vermilion bird looked at her with eyes of fire. The Vermilion Bird Realm is still in the hands of Blue Flame Manor. We must take it back first before we can return. This was why she had hurried over. She wanted to help her former people take back the Vermilion Bird Realm and leave an escape route if all hope was lost. If Lunar Temple and Sun Palace truly tried to slaughter every last foreign race that existed in Baluo Realm 10 years later, she would be able to take the low-rank vermilion birds who had joined her a long time ago back to Vermilion Bird Realm. As long as the 3 great races of Nether Realm are able to injure Blue Flame Manor severely, they will not have the strength to assume control over Vermilion Bird Realm. Tong Jinjin exclaimed. The rank 9 vermilion bird nodded before looking at Qin Lai. Please send us to the Nether Continent. Lord Tate, Qin Lai exclaimed. Standing near the white-bone nether spirit altar, Tate of the Horned Demon race activated the altar's teleportation formation after hearing his signal. A white, blurry light radiated from the teleportation formation like a water ripple. Qin Lai wanted to enter the teleportation formation with the rank 9 vermilion bird, but Tate stopped him. What is it? Qin Lai frowned. You're not allowed to go over. Tate kept his head low and said with a helpless look on his face. It is an order of the Venerable One. For now, you are not to show yourself at the Nether Continent or reveal your face to anyone from the Central World. I wish to speak with my grandfather, Qin Lai exclaimed. Tate shook his head. The Venerable One said that the time isn't right yet. And when will that be? Qin Lai said impatiently. This is something the Venerable One told me to pass to you. Tate passed over a letter to Qin Lai before saying, although that friend of yours, Gao Yu, isn't a nether realm denizen, he is shockingly talented in cultivating the 9 hell evil scripture. He gets along well with the queen because they know each other since their early days, and the demon god body he brought over is extremely useful to us. Now that Luz has returned, and the Vermilion bird race has decided to help us, we should be able to defeat the Blue Flame Manor. You don't have to worry too much. Tate understood that Ling Yushir was the greatest source of Qin Lai's worry. He believed that Qin Lai could hold on to his patience as long as he learned that Ling Yushir was fine and that the war situation on Nether Continent was improving. Please come with me. He invited the rank 9 Vermilion Bird and Tong Jinjin to enter the teleportation formation. Not long after, he vanished together with the husband and wife pair and the rank 9 Vermilion Bird. The teleportation formation inside the White Bone Nether Spirit altar slowly lost its glow and returned to normal. Qin Lai tore open the letter right next to the White Bone Nether Spirit altar and read it carefully. Liar, your identity has been exposed. The people of the Central World know that you're still alive. Right now, most of our family members are still hiding in other realms. The Central World is currently too powerful, so it is dangerous for you to expose yourself to them. The Land of Chaos is a special place. As long as you remain in the Land of Chaos, the martial practitioners of the Central World will not dare act against you openly. The reason I brought you to Scarlet Tide Continent back then was because Scarlet Tide Continent is part of the Land of Chaos. The forces of the Central World will not openly interfere with the Land of Chaos business because they have an old oath to obey. For now, it is better if you stay in the Land of Chaos. Also, if possible, please make an alliance between the Qin family and the powerful races of Boluo realm come true. Qin Shan's had clear handwriting. He had made clear a few things to Qin Lai. After reading through the letter several times and carving every word into his mind, Qin Lai burned the letter to dust. They have to obey an old oath, and not interfere with the Land of Chaos business? But why must the gold rank forces of the Central World obey some old oath? Qin Lai was very puzzled. He suddenly recalled that Su Ran once told him about 10,000 Beast Mountain and Celestial Artifact Sect asking for help from the Central World when the ghoul races still ravaged the Land of Chaos. Unfortunately, the gold rank forces didn't send anyone to deal with the arrogant ghouls for some unknown reason. It was almost as if there was an invisible barrier that was keeping the Land of Chaos and the Central World of Spirit Realm apart. I guess it's time to find out the truth behind all this, he mumbled to himself. Right now, the leaders of all silver rank forces were busy leading their men and eradicating the eastern barbarian tribes. If he thought about it carefully, there should only be a few people who were old enough to know the details of this secret. Shun Kuei. He must know the reason. Qin Lai's eyes abruptly lit up. After the battle at the Setting Sun Islands had ended, Shun Kuei had taken a couple of people back to Terminator Sect while Lei Yen led the rest of the Terminator Sect on an attack against the Eastern Barbarians. He was sure that Shun Kuei was aware of the reason why the gold rank forces of the Central World refrained from tainting the Land of Chaos with their fingers. And so he departed towards Terminator Sect from the ruined lands. At Rock Calamity Domain, a subordinate domain of Ninth Heaven, there were bodies littered every on the mountain peak of a dark red mountain. They obviously the bodies of a non-human race since they had sharp ears, green skin, and thin bodies. This race was known as the Green Spirit Race. It was the native race of Rock Calamity Domain. Green Spirit Race was just a small and unknown race in the vast galaxy. The strange pavilions made of trees and vines were currently engulfed by huge flames. A giant, luxurious-looking ship was suspended above the buildings. A banner slowly swayed to the wind. Exquisite layers of space were sewn into the banner. Every space contained a unique scenery of its own. It was Ninth Heaven's unique symbol. On the ship, a beautiful, dignified, and charming woman dressed in a long blue dress was staring at the big fire beneath the ship quietly. After 30 years had passed, she had slaughtered every last green spirit there was in Rock Calamity Domain. As she watched the Green Spirit Race's holy ground being turned to dust, she knew that there wouldn't be a dissenting voice, specifically, one that was against her. in Rock Calamity domain any longer. Thanks to her ruthless methods, the chaos that had troubled Rock Calamity domain had finally been buried along with the green spirit race. The giant ship was completely loaded with countless precious spirit materials that the green spirit race had excavated from the Rock Calamity domain for tens of thousands of years. These spirit materials were exceptionally useful to the recovery of one's life force. She knew that a sea of praises awaited her after she returned to Ninth Heaven. Her status in Ninth Heaven would solidify even further as a result. An old man who expected great things from her had long since informed her that the spirit materials necessary to construct her soul altar had been prepared. All she needed to do now was to return back to Ninth Heaven and construct the first level of her soul altar. Everything was progressing in the most ideal way possible. Is there still no news from the chaotic streams of space? Why hasn't little Lei returned yet? She looked at the loyal servant beside her with wrinkled eyebrows. The gold rank forces had all sent their fragmentation realm elites into that place, hadn't they? Why is there no news even now? We still have nothing, miss. The 8 great forces are investigating this as well, but so far, no progress has been made. An old servant surnamed Hans said bitterly, "No matter how disappointing little Lei is, he is still my little brother. If he hadn't lured that trash from the Qin family into my bedroom, I would never have won the good graces of Ninth Heaven and proved myself to those old bastards. The Han family wouldn't be as important as it is now," she said indifferently. The old servant nodded slightly. "Miss Han, the people you sent to the land of chaos had sent a message back to us." Suddenly, a Ninth Heaven martial practitioner rushed in and passed her a sound transmission stone. When she accepted the sound transmission stone and extracted the message inside it, a shudder abruptly coursed through her elegant figure. "What's wrong?" The old servant looked surprised. "Miss, what is it that has surprised you so? I've served you for many years, but I rarely see you lose your cool like this. That trash is still alive." Who's still alive?" the old servant subconsciously asked again. "Who else?" Han Qian sneered as disgust filled her expression. "Of course it's that young Master Qin with the god race's bloodline." "Ah!" The old servant paled as he exclaimed in shock. How is that possible? This is strange news to me too." Han Qian frowned slightly and said in puzzlement, "I remember clearly that I've taken his life. His true soul should have completely dissipated before Qin Shan came to us. So, how could he have come back to life? Are we absolutely sure it's him?" the old servant asked again. "There should be no mistake. He's called Qin Lai, and he possesses the god race's bloodline too." Irritation suddenly plagued Han Qian. "Furthermore, Ji Qi's heaven gold mirror is in his possession. Did he go to the chaotic streams of space too?" The old servant looked astonished. "He does have the god race's bloodline, so it's not really surprising that he found that place." "That's nothing surprising." Han Qian's lips curled as she said in a cold tone, "It seems that his bloodline has finally awakened and he has reached the fragmentation realm after 300 years. What should we do?" the old servant said in panic and worry. Although the Qin family suffered a terrible blow 300 years ago, everyone knows how extraordinary Qin Shan is in the art of artifact forging and how wealthy the Qin family was, not to mention that they still possess formidable strength. Back then, the reason the Qin family hadn't fought us to the death was because they knew that they couldn't fight all 6 gold rank forces by themselves. Moreover, Qin Hao's soul altar was shattered during the fight. That was the ultimate reason they evacuated from the central world and hid in those unknown realms. Everyone knows how scary Qin Hao is. He was able to escape all of us even after his soul altar had exploded. 300 years had passed. Qin Hao should have recovered his soul altar already. After so many years of rest and recuperation, the Qin family might have regained their full strength. If the Qin family returns to take revenge, Miss and the Han family will certainly become their highest priority target. What should we do? The old servant looked absolutely terrified when he mentioned the Qin family. It was as if a calamity was about to befall them. He held deep-rooted fear towards the Qin family. Back then, the six great forces had successfully exiled the Qin family from the Central World. Even if they did recover their strength after 300 years, they are still no match for the six great forces. Han Qian's eyes chilled a little as she sneered. As for that trash, I can always kill him again just as I've killed him 300 years ago. If he truly still lives in this world, then I will end his life once more. Then old servant stared at her in astonishment. I will personally head to the land of chaos after we've returned to the Central World. His elimination takes priority over other things, Han Qian said calmly. You absolutely mustn't. The old servant hurriedly stopped her. The land of chaos is a special place. All gold rank forces of the Central World are strictly forbidden from setting foot in that land. We may be able to influence the situation over there from behind the scenes, but the elderly experts will probably reprimand us harshly if we appear openly in the land of chaos. Why's that? Han Qian frowned. She was aware of the rule that was obeyed by all 8 gold rank forces of the Central World. No one had ever expanded their influence into the land of chaos. It was because the leaders of the 8 great forces kept a tight rein over their subordinates and stopped them from putting their fingers in the land of chaos. She once inquired about the exact reason from the elders of Ninth Heaven, but the matter seemed to be a subject of great taboo, and they weren't willing to talk to her about it. I don't know. The Han family wasn't an important family back then, so of course we weren't qualified to learn such secrets. The old servant shook his head. Then why is that trash able to go to the land of chaos? Why is he allowed to cause so much turmoil over there? Han Qian asked again. I only know that the Qin family had purposely stopped the martial practitioners of all forces from entering the land of chaos before they evacuated from the Central World. The old servant looked very puzzled as well. You're saying that the leaders of the Qin family aren't restricted by this rule? Han Qian stared at him blankly. That is what I heard. The old servant nodded. The first-generation leader, Qin Shan, and the second-generation leader, Qin Hao of the Qin family were unrivaled heroes of their generation, so I can accept that they had the right to go to the land of chaos. But right now that trash is the one over there. You're not telling me that the Qin family treats him as their third-generation leader, are you? What an absolute joke this is. Han Qian's eyes were full of disdain. Who knows? The old servant was just as puzzled as she was. Get everything ready as soon as possible. I'm going to meet those old bastards at Ninth Heaven and see what their stance is knowing that Qin Lai is still alive, Han Qian instructed. All right? At the Terminator sect. After Shen Yu had taken Qin Lai to Shen Kuei, he immediately asked to know about the reason the Central World kept away from the land of chaos. Elder Shen, you are a senior in Terminator sect, and you are very familiar with the past news of the land of chaos. Can you tell me why the Central World has no influence in the land of chaos? Little you? Please leave us. Shen Kuei didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he waved for Shen Yu to leave. Grandfather, you can't even let me know? Shen Yu looked astonished. Shen Kuei nodded. Only the leader of a force has the right to know this. The color of astonishment in Qin Lai's eyes deepened even further when heard this. All right. Left with no choice, Shen Yu left the room so that Qin Lai and Shen Kuei could speak privately. Come with me to the private room. After Shen Yu had left, Shen Kuei stood up and led Qin Lai into a stone chamber nearly 100 meters underground. The stone walls of this chamber were clearly covered in rippling energy barriers. After Qin Lai walked into the stone chamber and tried to set loose his soul consciousness, he discovered that his thoughts couldn't pass through the barrier at all. This room isolates all sound and soul perception. Not even a void realm expert will be able to infiltrate this place with their soul. Is such caution really necessary? Qin Lai exclaimed. Shen Kuei sighed quietly. It is a matter of great importance. If we are so lax that the news is spread, a malicious person may use it to their own benefit and bring a calamity upon us all. Calamity? What calamity? Qin Lai smiled and paid his words no mind. It can't be worse than the time the 3 ghoul races nearly tore the land of chaos apart. Can it? To his surprise, Shen Kuei actually nodded in response. Yes, it is far worse than that. Qin Lai withdrew his smile completely and sat up straight. He asked seriously, "What in spirit realm is it?" Shen Kuei suddenly fell silent. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully and pondering how best to explain everything to Qin Lai. The young man waited anxiously for his answer. A very, very long time later, Shen Kuei sucked in a deep breath before saying, "Truth be told, I don't know all that much. Everything I know comes from the previous sect master of the Terminator sect. He knew that he might die in the process of ascending to the Void Realm, so he told me this news so I may pass it down to Nanjing Tian or Su Ran. Of course, everyone who ultimately becomes the next sect master of Terminator sect has the right to learn this too." "You mean only the sect master of Terminator sect has the right to know this?" Qin Lai exclaimed in astonishment. Shen Kuei nodded yet again. "That's right. Still, Su Ran have traveled to many places, and it seems that he has learned about this secret through other means. Please tell me everything you know, Elder Shen," Qin Lai said seriously. "Can you answer me a question first?" Shen Kuei suddenly asked. "Please ask." "Not long ago, there was a ball of souls hanging above Flaming Sun Island. Did it belong to the soul progenitor? Also, did the soul progenitor's remains explode to bits?" "Yes. Naji's dark soul beast possessed many subsouls. Did they merge with the soul progenitor's soul sphere?" "That's right. Where did the ball of soul go in the end?" "I have sealed it away with a spirit artifact." Qin Lai didn't hide anything and told Shen Kuei everything he knew. However, his puzzlement also grew during the process. He didn't know why Shen Kuei was suddenly so interested in this matter. "Did Hester tell you that the Dark Soul Beast, Soul-Devouring Beast, and Blood Soul Beast were causing havoc before the God race arrived in Spirit Realm? Did he tell you that the Soul Progenitor had slowly gained a sizable amount of prestige among the human race around that period?" Shen Kuei asked. "He did." Qin Lai nodded strongly. "How much do you know?" Shen Kuei asked again. "After I'd discussed about this with Hester, I learned through other means that the Soul-Devouring Beast of Nether Realm, the Dark Soul Beast of Azura Realm, and the Blood Soul Beast of the Ancient Beast race all possessed a subsoul ability. These three strange beasts differed in appearances, but their abilities were extremely similar to each other." Qin Lai said seriously. "It is said that the soul progenitor's soul secret arts were extremely similar to the three strange beasts as well. Hester's ancestor once served the god race, and it was they who told him that the three strange beasts and the soul progenitor might belong to a completely different race, the soul race." "You even know about the soul race?" Shen Kuei exclaimed. "Hester shouldn't know this name. I had learned it from somewhere else," Qin Lai explained. Shen Kuei shot him a strange glance before he nodded. "It seems that you've done some investigation of your own." "It is true. The soul progenitor, the dark soul beast, the blood soul beast, and the soul-devouring beast were in fact all of the soul race." "How are they connected to the land of chaos then?" Qin Lai asked curiously. "They had come from a mysterious place right beneath our feet." Shen Kuei smiled bitterly. Qin Lai's expression changed as he let out an involuntary yell. "Right beneath our feet? To be more specific, the soul race came from an abyss channel deep under the sea of the land of chaos." Shen Kuei inhaled deeply before continuing. "Before the god race had arrived at Spirit Realm, the soul progenitor, blood progenitor, voodoo progenitor, corpse progenitor, and the curse progenitor had used their vast power to connect many islands and transform them into the Heavenly Slaughter Continent, Heavenly Silence Continent, Heavenly Calamity Continent, Heavenly Wither Continent, and Heavenly Fissure Continent. The 5 progenitors are responsible for creating one continent each. At the bottom of the 5 continents, they had constructed a mysterious ancient formation that is made of many layers of restrictions. The 5 continents are the cores of the formation, and the purpose of the formation is to suppress the Abyss Channel and prevent more soul race members from coming into our world. The Blood Progenitor's inheritance, Black Voodoo Cult's inheritance, and Miao Fengtian's corpse inheritance were left behind during that time. Heavenly Calamity Continent was created by the Blood Progenitor himself. He was also responsible for constructing the ancient formation under his continent. Heavenly Slaughter Continent was created in the same way by the Voodoo Progenitor. The remaining 3 continents are the same. How is that possible? Isn't the soul progenitor a member of the soul race? Why did he betray them and help the human race instead? Qin Lai looked to be in disbelief. Shen Kuei shook his head in equal puzzlement. He is a member of the soul race, but for some reason he tried very hard to prevent more of his clansmen from entering spirit realm. He was the one who informed the other 4 progenitors about the abyss channel at the bottom of the sea of the land of chaos. He was also the one who informed us about the dark soul beast, blood soul beast, and soul-devouring beast's origin. In fact, he was the one who urged the progenitors to create the 5 continents and suppress the abyss channel. The reason the human race still thought of him as the sole progenitor is because he once contributed to the stability and rise of the human race. Why else would the leaders of the gold rank forces at the Central World treat him as a progenitor when they knew his true identity? Qin Lai fell silent. A while later he asked again, "So, you're saying that the 5 continents of the land of chaos are actually creations of the progenitors? They gathered surrounding islands and joined them into larger continents because they wanted to suppress the abyss channel at the bottom of the sea." That is what I heard. Shen Kuei nodded. If I'm not mistaken, I heard that the 5 progenitors once requested the people in charge of the gold rank forces at the Central World to swear an oath never to dip their fingers in the land of chaos or damage the 5 continents. If a void realm or Genesis realm expert of a gold rank force operated in the land of chaos, the fight that ensues could threaten to break the ancient formation beneath the 5 continents apart. The abyss channel would open up again once the formation ceases to function. This may attract the soul race's attention and cause them to send more people into spirit realm to hurt us. Shen Kuei looked absolutely serious when he said this. According to the soul progenitor, the soul race is as famous as the god race in the vast galaxy. If more soul race members were to arrive at spirit realm through the abyss channel, many lives would be lost. Countless races and life forms would be converted into their puppets and avatars. The entire spirit realm may succumb to the soul race if they arrive in force. Compared to them, the 3 ghoul races are nothing. Shen Kuei sighed before continuing. Unfortunately, the god race showed up from outer space not long after the 5 progenitors had sealed up the abyss channel. The soul progenitor and the 3 great beasts were identified by the god race, and they were ultimately hunted down and killed. 10,000 years after that, the god race dominated spirit realm and ruled over our land. In the end, spirit realm still succumbed to another race. Shen Kuei lamented with a bowed head. He looked helpless. Where did you get this from? Qin Lai asked curiously. Shen Kuei looked up and stared at him. A flash passed through his eyes when he said suddenly, "The story comes from the old family leader of the Qin family." Qin Lai shook slightly in response. The old family leader of the Qin family once came to the land of chaos and informed the old leaders. Shen Kuei smiled. When he came to the Terminator sect to inform our former sect master about this, he happened to see Xianxia cultivating so hard that he forgot himself. At the time, Xianxia's talent was extremely average compared to the new disciples of Terminator sect, such as the extraordinarily talented Su Ran. You can say that gap was like a firefly and the moon. No one believed that Xianxia would become the sect master of Terminator sect one day. After a pause, Shen Kuei added, "Even I never gave Xianxia a second glance." After the old family leader of the Qin family arrived and spoke about the matter with the former sect master of Terminator sect, he happened upon a cultivating Xianxia as he was planning to leave. So, he decided to stay behind for a little while longer. Not long after, Xianxia slowly rose in power and cultivated faster than all the geniuses who were thought to be superior. Finally, Xianxia replaced Su Ran and became the current sect master of the Terminator sect. Qin Lai looked surprised. It was obvious that Shen Kuei knew of his identity already. So, he decided to be frank with the old man and admitted, "Qin Shan is my grandfather." Shen Kuei nodded smilingly. "I knew it since a while ago. The reason Su Ran and Tong Xinjin knew of your identity is because I told them. So, the gold rank forces of the Central World swore never to dip their fingers into the land of chaos, because they were afraid that the formation that suppresses the abyss channel at the bottom of the 5 continents would malfunction and cause new souls to enter our world. Is that it? Qianlai muttered. That is what I know, at least. If there are any other secrets, you'll have to ask your grandfather himself. Shen Kuei smiled wryly. Thank you for telling me all this, Elder Shen. Qianlai bowed respectfully towards Shen Kuei. Shen Kuei waved his hands. I thought you already knew about this, honestly. To think that you, a Qin family member, was actually unaware of this secret. How strange. Qianlai wasn't willing to speak of the time he died 300 years ago, so he bid Shen Kuei goodbye after chatting with him for a little while longer. When he stepped into the teleportation formation of Terminator Sect, he noticed a trace of resentment in Shen Yu's eyes. He could only pretend that he hadn't noticed. What did you tell him, grandfather? Shen Yu shot Shen Kuei a glare after sending Qianlai away and returning to her grandfather. What's so mysterious that you have to hide it even from me? Sorry. If it wasn't because the former sect master couldn't be sure who's the one between Nanjing Tian or Su Ran that would succeed him as the next sect master, even I shouldn't have learned about this. Shen Kuei answered her in a helpless tone. When Qin Shan showed up to inform the leaders of the Great Silver Rank forces about this, it was also to warn them never to damage the internal structure of the 5 continents no matter how bad their wars had devolved. If they didn't listen, the Qin family would punish all disobeyers strictly. Moreover, Qin Shan also informed that the gold rank forces of the Central World would never interfere with their business or dip their fingers into the land of chaos. The leaders of the 9 Great Silver Rank forces had restricted their disciples firmly since then. Every time they warred against one another, they made sure that the battlefield was set at the sky or the deep sea. They didn't even dare to damage Blood Cloud Mountain Range too much when they worked together to take out Blood Fiend Sect back then. The leaders of the Silver Rank forces had always abided to that invisible rule. They never damaged the continents beneath them. Lass, the fact that you haven't tied any knots with Qianlai may not necessarily be a bad thing. Shen Kuei sighed quietly. He is destined to be a passing traveler in the land of chaos and nothing more. His future is also full of uncertainty. You may not necessarily be happy if you came to be with him. I never thought about it, Shen Yu said quietly. Shen Kuei shook his head and stopped talking. Plagued by many thoughts, Qianlai went straight to Soul Summoning Island instead of returning to Flaming Sun Island. The 5 progenitors had gathered the surrounding islands and filled the sea to create 5 continents. Then, they assembled a mysterious formation that can suppress the Abyss Channel and prevent the Soul Race from ascending to Spirit Realm. The Soul Race is so powerful that they are equal in strength to the God Race. The God Race seems to be stirring and making preparations to return to Spirit Realm. The Soul Race also seems to be waiting for an opportunity to reap the fertile lands of Spirit Realm. Besides that, the shadow beings are slowly approaching our way. What would Spirit Realm turn into in the future? Where should I go from here on? Qianlai felt a little lost as he hovered above Soul Summoning Island. The future looked uncertain, and there were far too many unknown dangers to account for. RRRRRMMB. Suddenly, a resounding boom came from deep within the ruined lands. Qianlai subconsciously looked towards the distance. Swoosh! A gray light suddenly flashed past his vision. The cursed progenitor's remains flew out of his glabella, headed straight towards the origin of the explosion. Qianlai was caught off guard by this. The explosion came from Sane's island. Lapu abruptly appeared. He was probably constructing the 4th level of his soul altar and ascending to the void realm. Sane! It took a second before Qianlai realized who he was speaking of. He exclaimed, You mean Sane, the strongest of the 7 hidden experts of the land of chaos? Who else could it be? Lapu said solemnly. Why did the cursed progenitor's remains fly out then? Qianlai asked in puzzlement. What? Lapu didn't understand what he meant. The cursed progenitor I acquired from the chaotic streams of space had suddenly flown out on its own towards the island where Sane is cultivating, Qianlai explained. Ah, why is this happening? Lapu also exclaimed. Qianlai frowned. We should head there and check things out, no matter what happened. You're right, Lapu nodded. And so, the duo flew away from Soul Summoning Island, met up with the nearby forefather Dark Wind and headed straight for Sane's Island. Along the way, they saw many evil spirits and foreign beings gathering towards Sane's cultivation place, alerted by the explosion. At the ruined lands, many foreign races and evil spirits rushed out from all sorts of islands. Qin Lai, La Pu and forefather Dark Wind were also rushing towards Sane's cultivation ground in astonishment. Sane was the strongest cultivator out of the 7 hidden experts of the Land of Chaos. He once challenged Nanjingtian and lost the fight, but he was able to retreat safely from the battle. For many years, he had set himself up in the ruined lands and caused many great forces to think twice before setting foot in the ruined lands. This man was once known as the #1 evil spirit of the Land of Chaos. He was cruel and bloodthirsty, and many foreign races didn't dare to provoke him. Qin Lai had slowly gained in status in the ruined lands over time, but he has never met Sane. That was why he was rather curious about Sane. For many years, Sane had secluded himself in the ruined lands in order to construct the 4th level of his soul altar. Since the astounding explosion had come from where Sane was cultivating, it was only natural that it attracted everyone's attention. However, the thing that puzzled Qin Lai right now was the cursed progenitor flying out on his own towards Sane's location. He tried to sense the cursed progenitor with his soul consciousness while he was flying towards Sane's location. As he had expected, he was able to sense the cursed progenitor through a strange connection. He immediately noticed that the cursed progenitor's remains had also been tempered by the soul-suppressing orb. Its body and soul altar must have been covered in all kinds of strange ancient spirit diagrams. As the owner of the soul-suppressing orb, he could easily detect the cursed progenitor's location. A few minutes later, Qin Lai, La Pu and forefather Dark Wind stopped near the island Sane was cultivating on. Many evil spirits and foreign races that came from all directions also came to a stop and hovered nearby the island. No one dared to enter the island's airspace though. Sane is the strongest expert in the ruined lands. The island he cultivates in is the ruined land's largest forbidden ground, forefather Dark Wind explained casually. The evil spirits and foreign races operating here all obey the rules of the ruined lands and never enter into his territory, unless they are confident that they can beat him. Nanjingtian may be the only person in the entire Land of Chaos who is confident he can beat Sane. La Pu echoed. Astonishment colored Qin Lai's eyes. He could sense the cursed progenitor flying deep inside a blue mist right above Sane's island. There's something above Blue Nightmare Island. It looks like a person. There is something going on behind the fog. Suddenly, the evil spirits and foreign beings gathered around Sane's island exclaimed in unison. Some of these people were soul altar experts. They all noticed the cursed progenitor's blurry figure deep inside the blue fog. Are these the cursed progenitor's remains? La Pu asked in a low voice. Qin Lai nodded in puzzlement himself. Yes. Why has it appeared above Blue Nightmare Island? La Pu couldn't figure out the reason. I don't know myself, Qin Lai said. Someone dares to enter Blue Nightmare Island's airspace? Isn't he afraid that Sane will retaliate with bloody murder? Every single person who has dared to act impudently on Blue Nightmare Island had been ground to dust by Sane. What a bold fellow. I think it's because Sane is currently constructing his soul altar. That's why they dared to act so impudently and take advantage of him. The evil spirits gathered around the island chatted among themselves. RRRRMMB. A terrific rumble came from the underground of Blue Nightmare Island. Deep ravines rent apart the land of the island as the explosions ensued. Wisps of thick dark blue fog arose from the ravines. They gradually enveloped the entire Blue Nightmare Island. It wasn't long before no one around the island could see what was going on inside. Several evil spirits and foreign races clansmen tried to check what was going on inside by setting loose their soul consciousness. However, they all let out exclamations of surprise before they withdrew their soul consciousness in panic. A lot of them looked both afraid and shocked. Beside Qin Lai, forefather Dark Wind shuddered a little before letting out a dull groan. I almost couldn't withdraw the wisp of soul consciousness I extended into Blue Nightmare Island. It's almost as if I was stuck inside a swamp. You must be careful, he warned La Pu and Qin Lai. La Pu chuckled. I don't need to probe it with my soul. The third eye at his glabella opened to shoot a jade-green light towards Blue Nightmare Island. It didn't look like he was affected by the fog barrier. Qin Lai. Uncountable number of bizarre curse runes have appeared in the fog around the curse progenitor, La Pu exclaimed. The curse progenitor isn't the one who produced them. I can see it, Qin Lai said seriously. He had activated his bloodline power in secret and caused his eyes to turn dark red in color. For some reason, the dark blue fog covering the entirety of Blue Nightmare Island didn't affect his vision in the slightest. He could see 100 millions of bizarre curse runes growing clearer and clearer over time. These curse runes had appeared inside the thick fog out of nowhere. It was as if they were part of the land of chaos world spirit energy from the beginning. When he concentrated, he discovered that the curse runes weren't completely frozen. On the contrary, they seemed to be orbiting in a pattern that he couldn't understand. It was as if they were about to join together to form one mysterious, secret curse. While the curse runes were swimming, the laws of the world surrounding Blue Nightmare Island changed before anyone realized it. Qin Lai was certain that the absolute law of the world would be rewritten and transformed into something unbelievable once the secret curse had manifested in full. Qin Lai. Even if the fog barrier didn't exist, the curse runes on Blue Nightmare Island should still be invisible to most others. La Pu inhaled deeply as seriousness colored his expression. I have 8 eyes on my body, but my third eye is the only eye that can see those curse runes. I believe that these curse runes are the soul tendrils of resentful souls extracted and joined together to form a secret art I cannot understand. Blue Nightmare Island? Blue Nightmare Island. The word nightmare here is referring to the resentful souls. Qin Lai looked astonished. Then how am I able to see them? Your god race bloodline is very unusual, La Pu said solemnly. While they were conversing with each other, a shrill howl suddenly came from the fresh ravines of Blue Nightmare Island. The howl was filled with infinite hatred and violence. It was as if an inhuman demon was about to break free from its confinement. Sane's howling. La Pu's expression changed yet again. Sane is at the bottom of Blue Nightmare Island? Qin Lai looked astonished. He must be cultivating there right now, La Pu answered. Qin Lai was just about to say something when he noticed that the innumerable curse runes above Blue Nightmare Island suddenly joining together to form a mysterious, secret curse. The overall shape of the secret curse was similar to a middle-grade ancient spirit diagram he knew. That ancient spirit diagram was called realm restriction. Realm restriction was normally used together with spirit sealing. Once a spirit was sealed with spirit sealing, the use of realm restriction could prevent the spirit from ever growing stronger or breaking through its existing realm. Through this method, one could ground the willpower of the spirit bit by bit until it ultimately submitted to its captor in despair. Right now, the secret curse of Blue Nightmare Island looked extremely similar to realm restriction. While Qin Lai was making the connection in his mind, the law of the world around Blue Nightmare Island changed quietly. An invisible power that was capable of restricting one's power abruptly descended across Blue Nightmare Island. Everyone here suddenly felt like they could never advance into the next realm ever again. The middle stage fragmentation realm, Qin Lai felt like he could never ascend to the late stage of the fragmentation realm. La Pu also felt like he could never manifest his 9th eye. Forefather Darkwind and many other evil spirits and foreign beings felt the same thing as well. Despair and fear colored many people's faces. No! It was at this moment Sane's voice suddenly came from the underground of Blue Nightmare Island. This is the 2nd time. Damnable heavens! What kind of sin have the denizens of the land of chaos committed to make you curse us so? I won't acknowledge this. I will never give up. Qin Lai shuddered greatly the moment he heard this. No gold rank force of the central world was allowed to step foot in this place where the abyss channel at the bottom of the sea exists. No void realm or Genesis realm experts are allowed to appear or fight in the land of chaos. The 5 progenitors had worked together to suppress the abyss channel. The secret curse of the cursed progenitor. As the stream of thoughts passed through his mind, Qin Lai suddenly realized something. The land of chaos is also a cursed land. Whenever the living beings of the land of chaos tries to ascend to the void realm, the curse would befall on them. No wonder the silver rank forces experts of this place were never able to ascend to the void realm. No wonder the 9 great silver rank forces can never improve further and evolve into a gold rank force. The curse progenitor must have cast a terrifying secret curse similar to realm restriction on the land of chaos to ensure its prolonged stability. As long as a cultivator lives in the land of chaos, they will always be rebuffed by the secret curse whenever they try to ascend to the void realm. Only by leaving the land of chaos would they be able to avoid its curse. Qianlai's eyes abruptly lit up. At Blue Nightmare Island, an invisible power of restriction intimidated all living beings within range. The humans weren't the only ones who were terrified by the power. The foreign races were just as shaken. It was obvious that the mysterious secret curse that damaged the laws of the world worked on all living beings. It was a fact that no living being in the land of chaos was able to progress beyond the late stage of the imperishable realm. Budo, Iston, and Fines were void realm experts in the past, so they weren't subject to this restriction. But everyone else who wasn't already at that power level, such as the Dragonman race, Lizard race, Birdman race, Grey Wing race, and other smaller races wouldn't be able to break through that limit and ascend to the void realm. A void realm living being may be able to affect the great formation that is suppressing the abyss channel and shatter the seals and barriers beneath the 5 continents. That was why the curse progenitor had laid a curse on the land of chaos. All living beings who are close to ascending would be obstructed by the secret curse. All of their efforts would become wasted due to the changes of the laws of the world. That has to be the case. Qianlai thought to himself. I won't admit defeat. I will break through this limit. Sane howled courageously from the bottom of Blue Nightmare Island. He seemed to be intent on going against the heavens and ascend to the void realm while still being restricted the secret curse. The heavens aren't the ones who have rewritten the laws of the world. It was the curse progenitor. Qianlai inhaled deeply before he glared at the curse progenitor's remains. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. The strange secret curse that was made of countless soul tendrils of resentful souls could only be seen by him and La Pu. Everyone else couldn't detect the truth even if they tried to probe their surroundings with their soul consciousness. After Sane's howl, the blue fog that surrounded Blue Nightmare Island suddenly thinned. Deep blue light suddenly shone from the ravines and enveloped Blue Nightmare Island in beautiful colors. Many lanky soul figures could be seen making tearing gestures inside the blue light. The thick fog barrier was shredded into pieces as a result. However, the bizarre scene only lasted for an instant. The mysterious power of restriction that enveloped the entire Blue Nightmare Island suddenly grew even stronger than before. It was as if an invisible divine hand was pressed heavily onto Blue Nightmare Island. Boom! Blue Nightmare Island shuddered greatly, and Sane at the bottom of the island seemed to have suffered a terrible blow. No! I will not give up. Damnable heavens! I will make a third attempt to reach the void realm. Unless you kill me, Sane howled. The evil spirits and foreign races around Blue Nightmare Island couldn't see what was going on inside the island, but they could hear Sane's unresigned howls. Their eyes all turned incredibly serious. An unknown power has rewritten the laws of the world and prevented Sane from breaking through naturally. Where in spirit realm did this power come from? The evil spirits and foreign races examined their surroundings and looked at the people around them with darkened looks on their faces. There was a blurry figure at Blue Nightmare Island just now, someone reminded. The moment the person said this, the rest of the evil spirits and foreign beings suddenly to realization and nodded in response. You absolutely must be careful when you reclaim the cursed progenitor's remains later. If Sane misunderstood that you were the one who's preventing him from ascending, he would probably hunt you till the ends of spirit realm. La Pu hurriedly reminded. Qianlai's expression also changed slightly. It was at this moment Qianlai noticed that the cursed progenitor's remains were hovering right at the center of the fog of secret curse. Countless strange curse runes joined in formation that looked like the realm restriction ancient spirit diagram and surrounded the cursed progenitor. Crack! An extremely loud crack resounded from beneath Blue Nightmare Island. Sane's blood-curdling scream cut through the air right after. The lanky soul figures inside the dark blue light all suddenly vanished. Sane's powerful aura swiftly decayed after that. Everyone knew that Sane's attempt to ascend to the Void Realm had failed completely. That loud crack was the sound of his 4-level soul altar disintegrating into nothingness. Failed? He must have failed. That's the sound of his 4-level soul altar breaking. I think this is the second time he had failed. Everyone was discussing this among themselves. Suddenly, Qianlai noticed that the curse runes surrounding the curse progenitor were being absorbed into the body. The thick blue fog that surrounded Blue Nightmare Island was dissipating at an astonishing rate. At the same time, the invisible power that intimidated every living being here vanished in an instant. In just a dozen or so seconds, the curse runes were completely absorbed by the corpse progenitor. Once the curse runes were gone, the corpse progenitor's body flew away from Blue Nightmare Island and headed straight for Qianlai's glabella. "Don't!" Lapu exclaimed. Qianlai also tried to stop the curse progenitor with his mind. Unfortunately, the curse progenitor's body didn't heed his mental commands at all. It suddenly turned into a stream of curse runes and entered his glabella just as it was 100 or so meters away from him. Since the thick fog had disappeared, everyone had regained clear vision of their surroundings. They immediately concentrated their gazes onto Qianlai. The young man instantly fell under the limelight. He's the island master of Flaming Sun Island. Qianlai. It was him. The evil spirits and foreign beings quickly identified Qianlai. They all wore strange looks on their faces. "It's a misunderstanding. It's all just a misunderstanding. Please don't overthink this," Lapu hurriedly tried to explain. He noticed that many evil spirits and foreign races were shooting him very unfriendly looks. To think that he's the one who stopped Sane from ascending both times. An old man of the Grey Wing race exclaimed sinisterly. It seems that Flaming Sun Island doesn't just want to take over the other continents. They're planning to rule even the ruined lands. Fishmen warriors also echoed his sentiment. Flaming Sun Island may be planning to rule every inch of the land of chaos. Flaming Sun Island is probably afraid that Sane's breakthrough would affect their grand plans. That's why they stop him again and again, others said. Suddenly, Qianlai became everyone's target. They all thought that he was the mastermind behind all this. "It really is just a misunderstanding," Lapu said helplessly. Cough, 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 cough. Suddenly, Sane's fierce coughs came from deep beneath Blue Nightmare Island. Lapu and Forefather Dark Wind's expressions changed too. Still coughing, a lanky old man slowly floated out of a dark cave. The old man's white hair was extremely eye-catching. His chest area was completely covered in blood. His pupils looked as fearsome as a ghost, and they burned like 2 balls of flame. He shot Qianlai a crazed, bloodthirsty look. "Are you the one who did this?" "Sane. This is a misunderstanding," Lapu hurriedly said. "Shut up." The white-haired old man couldn't stop from vomiting a mouthful of blood as he yelled. He coughed loudly and calmed himself down bit by bit before he finally spoke up again in a dark tone. "I know that you were at the ruined lands a few years ago. At the time, I was also trying to ascend to the Void Realm. However, Flaming Sun Island was just a nameless force back then, and you aren't nearly as powerful and important as you are now. You're a rat who only dare to stab people in the back these days, aren't you? Did you finally emerge from your hole today because you thought Flaming Sun Island had gathered enough experts and ruled the land of chaos?" He was certain that Qianlai was the mastermind behind his downfall. The evil spirits and foreign races around Blue Nightmare Island might not have been able to see the sky of curse runes being absorbed into the curse progenitor's body. But he could. He even saw the curse progenitor's body turning into a stream of curse runes and entering Qianlai's glabella in the end. How could he possibly believe that Qianlai was unrelated to this? "What's going on?" It was at this moment Xianxia's voice suddenly rang from beside Qianlai. Then, a pair of hands appeared out of nothing and tear a hole in space bit by bit. Xianxia walked out of the spatial rift coolly. Flame Demon Tang Beidou was right behind him. The chuckling old man yelled, Our men told us that the island master had run into trouble at Blue Nightmare Island. We were just about to make it to the eastern barbarians' nests. To think that we have to make a detour here. What a drag! Many evil infant island martial practitioners were operating nearby. When they noticed that something was amiss, they had immediately notified Song Tingyu. Song Tingyu immediately told Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidu about this. Duan Xianxia was well-versed in the power of space. He was capable of creating a temporary spatial passage with his powers. That was how he teleported from the vast Eastern Sea region to the ruined lands immediately. The evil spirits and foreign races around Blue Nightmare Island suddenly fell silent. La Pu and Forefather Dark Wind also let out a secret sigh of relief. The 7 great hidden experts might be helmed by Sane, but Tang Beidu and Duan Xianxia were right behind him. What might have been a one-sided slaughter suddenly became not so one-sided because of Tang Beidu and Duan Xianxia's appearance. So you two are the ones who are supporting him. No wonder he's bold enough to stop me from entering the Void Realm, Sane said through gritted teeth. He thought that Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidu were participants of this ploy too. What does your failure to reach the Void Realm have to do with Qin Lai? Tang Beidu rubbed his messy hair and glanced at Sane. He said impatiently, "Are you deliberately trying to stir trouble?" Duan Xianxia's expression was cold as he said, "What is going on? What is going on?" Sane's eyes were filled with viciousness. "I've attempted to reach the Void Realm twice, and at the most important moment, I would be affected by a curse which comes from the world. It destroyed the 4th level of my soul altar. This time I saw it clearly. That strange curse went into his brow." Sane pointed at Qin Lai. Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidu looked at each other and their expression became serious. The two seemed to understand Sane and knew he was not the kind of person who would accuse people baselessly. Since Sane was so certain, it may have been true. Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidu felt doubts rise. "Qin Lai, what is going on?" Tang Beidu said seriously. On the sides, the group of evil spirits and foreign races clansmen looked with burning gazes at him. They also wanted to know the truth. Under everyone's eyes, Qin Lai thought for a while and suddenly said, "Elder Sane, if you do not object, will you allow me to go to Blue Nightmare Island and explain this matter?" "Explain? The truth is right in front of you. What can you explain?" Sane said harshly. Qin Lai's expression was grave as he said, "If I want to take over the ruined lands right now, I do not need to stop you from reaching the Void Realm. Even if you did reach Void Realm, I can ask for more experts to easily kill you. Do you believe me? Not long ago, this boy invited 2 rank 9 dragons who defeated Istin and Fines of the Heaven Ghoul race." Tang Beidu raised his head and grinned. He said, "Istin and Fines were both 5-level soul altar ghouls. Sane, if he really wanted to kill you, even if you reached the Void Realm, you would not be able to do anything." Duan Xianxia also spoke up. Tang Beidu and Duan Xianxia proclaimed Qin Lai's astounding strength. Their words seemed to have reached Sane. After pondering for a while, he nodded and let Qin Lai to go to Blue Nightmare Island to explain. "La Pu, you and Forefather Dark Wind stay outside the island and do not let anyone go into Blue Nightmare Island." Qin Lai turned his head and said. La Pu laughed dryly. He said, "Even without our protection, no one would dare enter Blue Nightmare Island." Qin Lai understood. "Then let's return first." Throwing the words down, he, Tang Beidu, and Duan Xianxia all entered Blue Nightmare Island together. "Out of the way!" Sane shouted. The evil spirits and foreign races clansmen that had gathered here did not dare to linger, seeing Sane driving them away, and hurriedly scattered. In a short dozen seconds, there was hardly anyone left around Blue Nightmare Island. "Qin Lai, what is going on?" Duan Xianxia was curious. At this time, Qin Lai and the other 2 people had reached the forest of Blue Nightmare Island, which had several bamboo towers. Along the way, Sane's eyes were dark and cold. They looked as if he would attack Qin Lai if he didn't have a very good explanation for him. Regardless of Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidu's presence, entering a bamboo house, Qin Lai sat down and looked at the others. He asked, "Do you know of an ancient formation created by the 5 progenitors inside the 5 continents of the Land of Chaos?" "No," Tang Beidou had a bewildered expression. Duan Xianxia and Sane also shook their heads. Qinlai thought and then said, "Some things you don't need to know. However, you have all reached the late stage of the imperishable realm and will soon attempt to ascend to the void realm. I think you should know it." Tang Beidou and Duan Xianxia's expressions became grave. "Deceptive." Sane snorted. Qinlai was not angry but narrated what Shen Kuei had told him before. The origins of the soul progenitor, the blood soul beast, the dark soul beast, and the soul-devouring beast, the abyss channel at the bottom of the ocean of the land of chaos, the mystery of 5 continents formation, the non-interference agreement between the gold rank forces of the central world. He didn't conceal a single detail. At the start, Sane did not quite believe him. However, as Qinlai continued to go deeper, his expression also became grave. It was truth that the gold rank forces of Central World had never come into this land. What Qinlai said about black voodoo cult and blood fiend sects' inheritances and origins were logical and worthy of thought. After Qinlai finished, even Sane believed the truth of the matter, along with Duan Xianxia and Tang Beidou. So there is an abyss channel at the bottom of the ocean. The 5 continents have been formed to suppress the abyss channel. Tang Beidou shouted. So that's how it is. No wonder Li Mu stopped me when I wanted to go to the bottom of the ocean to cultivate. After that, regardless of how I pressed, he was unwilling to state the reason. He only said for me to trust him and not ask questions. Duan Xianxia murmured and said, "He was afraid that my space-oriented power would damage the abyss pathway at the bottom of the ocean and cause unexpected changes." "I also remember," Tang Beidou shouted. "Once, I went to the volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean around the heavenly slaughter continent in search for a spirit material I could use to build the 3rd level of my soul altar. But then Old Monster Nan, Jiang and Qiyang, and the others came and warned me not to touch these underwater volcanoes. After I successfully built the 3rd level of my soul altar through other means, I challenged Old Monster Nan in anger because of that very reason. It seems they were also afraid that I would disrupt the formation at the bottom of the heavenly slaughter continent." Sane's expression was dark as he said, "The 9 silver rank forces ally every century to exterminate the sea race. In other corners of the world, there are powerful sea race clansmen, but the ones around the land of chaos would be exterminated every once in a while. Ultimately, no more powerful clansmen of the sea race could grow up. They were forced to move to other oceans to survive. I didn't understand it before and wondered what was the reason behind their actions. So they were actually scared of powerful sea race clansmen growing up and damaging the seal on the abyss channel." Pausing, he looked at Qinlai and said, "But what does that have to do with my breakthrough? In these years, hasn't it been rare for humans and foreign races alike to reach the void realm in the land of chaos?" Qinlai asked in response. Sane and the other 2 thought and nodded together. "Yes. The last sect masters of Terminator Sect, Celestial Artifact Sect, 10,000 Beast Mountain, and Celestial Artifact Sect and Illusory Demon Sect, as well as the last generation of experts almost all had problems when reaching the void realm. Some people died, their soul altar exploding. Some people received serious soul injuries, having lost their cultivations. Those people could never reach a chance for a breakthrough again. In conclusion, the experts in the late stage of the imperishable realm who possessed 3-level soul altars had an extremely difficult time building the 4th level. According to what I know, breaking into the void realm is difficult, but no place has such a low rate of reaching the void realm as the land of chaos. In the other places of spirit realm, at least 1 or 2 out of 10 imperishable realm martial practitioners would reach the void realm. In the ancient forces of Central World, 4 out of 10 reach the void realm. Yet, in the land of chaos, not even 1 void realm martial practitioner will come out of 10 late-stage imperishable realms. It would take 50 or even more for 1 void realm expert to appear. Qinlai took a deep breath and said, "Because, the moment they attempt the breakthrough, they would encounter the world curse, just like you. This time, because I was present, and because the original culprit, the curse progenitor, was also present, the world curse appeared directly. At least, La Pu and I could see it. But before this, all those affected by the curse could not see or even feel the curse because it is invisible. Even if someone saw it, They may had their souls destroyed due to the abnormality. Only a rare few survived. They may have been like you, and thought that this curse is a test everyone must go through when attempting a breakthrough to the Void Realm. No one ever knew the truth. When he said this, Qianlai paused, and gave the three time to think. You mean, the curse is not natural, but something the 5 progenitors had left behind to stop the Abyss Channel from being opened? The curse progenitor created a curse that greatly decreased success rate of achieving the Void Realm. Tang Beidou was shocked. The curse progenitor is also a progenitor of humans. Why did he treat the human descendants so? Duan Xianxia said. No, he didn't target human race. Sane's brows were furrowed. Back then, in the ancient era before the god race had even arrived, the humans were extremely weak. At that time, the land of chaos was not ruled by the humans, but the underwater sea race. This curse should have initially targeted the sea race and the foreign races, not the human race. However, the human race gradually rose, conquering the other parts of Spirit Realm, and gradually moving to the land of chaos and turning the land of chaos into a human territory. So this curse that originally targeted the foreign races now restrict current era's humans. After arriving at this conclusion, Sane completely believed Qianlai's explanation. Blue Nightmare Island. The 3 great experts heard the secret and suddenly fell silent. The curse existing in the land of chaos would activate when the beings of this land attempt to break through to the Void Realm. Foreign races, human race, as long as they were intelligent beings, they could not avoid the curse. For many years, all the late-stage imperishable realm experts had accidents occur at this step. Sane already felt the power of the curse twice. Duan Qianxia and Tang Beidou were both in the late stage of the imperishable realm. They possessed 3-level soul altars. It wouldn't take them long to attempt a breakthrough to Void Realm. At that time, they would face being restrained by the curse. What should they do then? Old Monster Nan is in seclusion trying to reach the Void Realm. Up until now, no news of success has spread. Tang Beidou's expression changed slightly. Has Old Monster Nan been affected by the curse? He definitely cannot avoid the curse, Sane said coldly. He is the strongest person in the land of chaos. If even he cannot escape the curse and reach the Void Realm, it will be even more difficult for us. Duan Qianxia's expression was dark. Qianlai's brow shifted. Nan Jingtian had been in seclusion for a long time, and no news had spread. He felt this was strange. It seemed that Nan Jingtian had encountered the curse Sane did when he was attempting a breakthrough. He just did not know how severe for Nan Jingtian's the curse progenitor's curse would be. A curse that was targeting the foreign races became a restraint on us when the human race prospered. Tang Beidou sighed. His mind shifted. He said, if we leave the land of chaos to attempt our breakthrough, will the curse not affect us? Duan Qianxia and Sane's eyes lit up at the same time. Possible. Qianlai's expression changed. He said, if one in the late stage of the imperishable realm leaves the land of chaos and go to another place to have the breakthrough, they may not be affected by the curse. Sane gathered his confidence and said, after I recover, I will collect and gather the spirit materials for the soul altar and go out of the land of chaos to attempt my breakthrough. Duan Qianxia and Tang Beidou looked at him, their eyes filled with anticipation. If Sane could succeed, the two of them only had to copy him to have a high possibility of reaching Void Realm. If this method worked, imperishable realm experts of the land of chaos would have found a way to avoid the curse of the land of chaos. Boy, where did you get curse progenitor's remains? Also, why was he able to absorb the curse runes? Sane suddenly asked. From another graveyard of gods in the chaotic streams of space, Qianlai said. Sane thought and nodded. He said, I now believe that this matter has nothing to do with you. I hope that everyone will keep the Abyss Channel a secret and not divulge any information to others, Qianlai asked. The 3 nodded. Uncle Duan, Elder Tang, how is the situation of the Eastern Barbarians? Qianlai asked. The forces are about to reach the Eastern Barbarians' lands, Tang Beidou responded. The Eastern Barbarians are not easy to deal with. Duan Qianxia frowned and said, the spatial vibrations around Eastern Barbarians' homeland. The whole place is filled with some strange miasma. When black voodoo cult and illusory demon sect allied together to invade the Eastern barbarians' lands, they lost their sense of direction, fell into natural wards, or even tried to kill each other. He looked at Qin Lai and said, "Actually, I suggest not attacking Eastern barbarians' homeland. Yes, in all these years, the silver rank forces of the Land of Chaos have always suffered losses when invading the Eastern barbarians." Tang Beidou nodded and said, "I cultivated in the Eastern Fire Hell previously and frequently made trouble for the Eastern barbarians. However, that was only at the edge of the Eastern Fire Hell. Even I would easily get lost trying to reach the islands where the Eastern barbarians live, or even lose my mind. In conclusion, the lands where the Eastern barbarians live are covered in all kinds of miasma with many strange properties." When Tang Beidou and Duan Xianxia spoke, they constantly looked at Sane, as though they were observing Sane's expression. Qin Lai found it strange. When they finished talking, Sane snorted and said, "It is not convenient for me to act." Qin Lai was astounded. Tang Beidou snickered and said, "You accused the brat unfairly and learned such secrets from him. When you leave the Land of Chaos this time, you might successfully reach the Void Realm. Considering all of this, you actually owe the brat." Pausing, he then said, "The Eastern barbarians are in cahoots with the ghoul races and tried cover the Land of Chaos in blood. Their deaths will be deserved. The Eastern barbarians may have gold-rank forces of the Central World behind them," Duan Xianxia said. Qin Lai became even more shocked. Through Tang Beidou and Duan Xianxia's words, he knew the two wanted Sane to act. However, what did the two see in Sane? They were all in the late stage of the imperishable realm. Sane had just failed his breakthrough and should be seriously injured. How could he be of much help? Qin Lai was extremely puzzled. Brat, the spirit art Sane cultivates is related to the miasma. Blue Nightmare Island is always shrouded in miasma. Tang Beidou saw his puzzlement and explained in giggles. "In the past, Sane disappeared for a while. No one knew where he went, but I do. He was cultivating in the miasma that even the Eastern barbarians think of as a forbidden land. This miasma may be troublesome for Duan Xianxia, but it's nothing for Sane. If he comes with us, the natural environment the Eastern barbarians rely on would be deemed ineffective. After all, Sane's power comes from there." Tang Beidou shouted. Qin Lai's expression was invigorated. "I will not go there." Sane looked at the three with a dark expression. He said, "And I suggest that you do not push the Eastern barbarians too much. There are terrifying things living in the restricted lands of the Eastern barbarians." When the words were said, Tang Beidou and Duan Xianxia's expressions became serious. "What things?" Tang Beidou frowned and said. Qin Lai also changed expression. "What's the matter?" Sane was the strongest of the 7 hidden experts. He had late imperishable realm cultivation. He had dominated for many years, and only lost to Nan Zhengtian once. After the matter, while severely injured, he left Terminator sect, and Nan Zhengtian also announced he was going into seclusion for healing. From this, it could be seen that Nan Zhengtian had also paid a great price to achieve his victory. For such a person to show such evident fear when speaking of the forbidden lands of the Eastern barbarians, Qin Lai and the others had to treat this matter seriously. "I cannot say." Sane shook his head and said coldly, "I only urge you to not go into the depths of the forbidden lands." Duan Xianxia's expression changed and he said, "I wonder if it is too late." "What?" Qin Lai shouted. "When we were coming, the leaders of the silver rank forces has ordered the martial practitioners to charge to the islands where the Eastern barbarians live." Tang Beidou restlessly pulled his hair and said, "They may have already launched an attack. The Eastern barbarians suffered great losses this time, and we also gathered all the experts. Even without me and old Duan, they would have the upper hand against the Eastern barbarians. They may have acted without waiting for us to come back." Duan Xianxia's brow furrowed. "Elder, what is in the forbidden lands of the Eastern barbarians?" Qin Lai asked urgently. "Hard to describe. You should urge those people to stop and not rashly enter," Sane said. Qin Lai took a deep breath and then took out a sound transmission stone to send a message. In the gray mists over the eastern seas, islands dotted the surface like stars in the sky. Inside the thick miasma, the enormous flying spirit artifacts of the silver rank forces moved around the islands where the eastern barbarians lived. Strange, just a while ago, I felt many eastern barbarians appearing and disappearing. Why did we stop sensing the eastern barbarians after entering the miasma? Qiyang of 10,000 Beast Mountain felt puzzled and said, "When we entered, those eastern barbarians disappeared like ghosts. It is strange. The eastern barbarians seem to be able to disappear in the miasma," Feng Yi said in shock. On another flowing gold fire phoenix, Song Tingyu, Tan Miao, Li Mu, and the others looked around. Their vision was restricted by the thick miasma. Even the range covered by their soul consciousness was greatly reduced. They suddenly lost their ability to lock onto the eastern barbarians. At this time, a silver bracelet on Song Tingyu's wrist suddenly gave off soul fluctuations. She listened to the message with her mind, terror appearing on her face. She hurriedly said, "Order everyone to immediately stop and not go deeper into the eastern barbarians' lands." "What is it?" Li Mu was stunned. Yu Lingwei of Illusory Demon Sect, Mo Lingye of Blood Fiend Sect, Mo Jun and the others all looked curiously at her. Qin Lai has just sent a message and said there is a great danger in the forbidden lands of the eastern barbarians. "He told us not to enter," Song Tingyu said. "Oh!" Mo Lingye exclaimed. "What is it?" Li Mu said. "Before I came, Jiang Zhuzhe told me to not participate in the slaughter against the eastern barbarians. He said, to kill eastern barbarians outside their home, and try not to charge into the tribes of the eastern barbarians." Mo Lingye's expression became serious. He said that the forbidden lands of the eastern barbarians contain unknown dangers. He also said when he cultivated among the eastern barbarians would frequently perform secret ceremonies in the forbidden lands. The eastern barbarians even concealed it from him. He does not know the secret of the forbidden lands. "Sect Master Yu, have you ever entered this place?" Li Mu asked. "I have never come. My master and my senior uncle once led a group here, but they suffered great losses here," Yu Lingwei said. "It seems strange." Li Mu frowned. Ah! At this time, screams came from where Celestial Artifact Sect and 10,000 Beast Mountain were gathered. When the screams ran out, they all realized something was amiss, their expressions changing. The blood-curdling screams first started at the Celestial Artifact Sect and 10,000 Beast Mountain's areas of operations. Not long after, the screams came from the directions of Heavenly Sword Mountain and Terminator Sect as well. A moment ago, these martial practitioners were chatting cheerfully with one another. Then, they suddenly bled from all orifices, clutched their heads and screamed in pain. The thick miasma above the sea surface gradually enveloped the suspended spirit artifacts and ships in the sky. Screams came incessantly from inside the miasma. The silver rank forces martial practitioners quickly lost their souls and perished. There's something inside the mist. Their souls are being devoured. A strange soul ripple is coming from inside that mist. Angry yells became mixed with the screams of those poor martial practitioners. "Form a soul barrier with your soul energy and protect your true souls," Qiang exclaimed. "Beware not to let anything foreign enter into your soul." Feng Yi also warned his people. All martial practitioners who ventured into the thick miasma hurriedly reacted upon hearing Qiang and Feng Yi's shouts. They quickly sat down, held their breaths and created barriers of soul energy. They protected their true souls with all their might. ZZZT. ZZZT, ZZT, ZZZT. Black fire kept sparking out of their eyes as a foreign soul energy attempted to brute force into their souls. Something really is trying to pierce through our soul barrier. The remaining silver rank forces martial practitioners hurriedly summoned their soul energy and guarded their souls. In the end, the blood-curdling screams didn't come as frequently as before. Still, some martial practitioners were killed by the surprise attack. The victims had completely lost their true souls and didn't show any signs of life. "There's something strange about the Eastern Barbarians' homeland," Song Tingyu said seriously. Send a message and ask Qin Lai what's going on as soon as possible, Li Mu urged. Okay. At Blue Nightmare Island, Qin Lai stared at Sane with a dark look on his face. What in spirit realm is inside the forbidden land of the Eastern barbarians? Qin Lai told you about the secret of the forbidden curse and the abyss channel beneath the land of chaos. Didn't he? Why can't you return the favor? Tang Beidou glared at him. Even Duan Xianxia was looking unfriendly. Open a spatial passage. I'll accompany you to the Eastern barbarian tribes, Sane suddenly said. Tang Beidou's eyes lit up. All right. Duan Xianxia nodded and gathered the power of space immediately. He forcefully tore open a spatial rift above Blue Nightmare Island. A sparkling temporary passageway gradually took form. Quickly. It takes him a lot of power to maintain the spatial passageway. We shouldn't waste time here. Tang Beidou instantly passed through the spatial passageway the moment it was formed. Qin Lai and Sane followed quickly behind him. They also vanished into the spatial passage as quickly as lightning. It was only after the trio were gone that Duan Xianxia followed and vanished into the spatial passageway. An instant later, Qin Lai found himself inside the thick miasma. When he probed around with his consciousness, he detected a lot of life auras right ahead of him. They're right in front of us. Tang Beidou led the way in front of them. Dozens of seconds later, Tang Beidou had led them to the camps of Flaming Sun Island. Sane! Li Mu exclaimed. Tan Miao, Lui, Yulingwei, and the others all shook a little when they saw Sane. It was obvious that they were slightly afraid of him. Qin Lai, there seems to be something inside the thick mist. A lot of people died because they lost their souls earlier, Song Tingyu hurriedly explained. What in spirit realm is going on? Li Mu asked. We've purposely invited Sane over to give us an answer, Tang Beidou said. Naturally, everyone turned to look at Sane and awaited his answer. Despite their expectant gazes, Sane didn't immediately answer. Instead, he took out a blurry-looking light ball that looked a little like the illusory demon orb. The interior of the light ball was unclear and illusory. Whoosh! The light ball floated above everyone's hands after he tossed it into the air. At first, it didn't look all that impressive. Cough, cough. After coughing a few times, thick mist abruptly poured out of Sane's body and created an attraction force. The miasma surrounding them was absorbed into his body. At the same time, the light ball suspended above their heads was absorbing the nearby miasma at an even greater rate. The thick miasma that enveloped everyone quickly thinned after Sane and the light ball had absorbed most of it into their bodies. The islands that were covered by mist slowly became clearer. A lot of Eastern barbarians were revealed on the islands as the mist dissipated. These Eastern barbarians clearly looked afraid as they ran away in search for a place to hide. All imperishable realm martial practitioners may come with me, Sane said as his eyes shone with an odd sparkle. He then walked deeper into the island while the light ball followed above his head. What is going on, Island Master Qin? Qiyang asked loudly. All soul altar experts, follow Sane now, Qin Lai responded. Sane? Do you mean the number one evil spirit, Sane? Why is he here? Luo Han's expression changed. Sect Master. An artificer looked at Feng Yi. Heed Qin Lai's command. Feng Yi ordered. The Soul Altar martial practitioners of Celestial Artifact Sect, 10,000 Beast Mountain, Heavenly Sword Mountain and Terminator Sect followed behind Sane despite carrying heavy doubts in their hearts. As they were traveling, they noticed several life auras in the islands around them. This meant that many Eastern barbarians were hiding somewhere inside the islands. However, Sane didn't even give those islands a second glance. Instead, he walked straight towards the place where the miasma was the thickest. Much of the miasma vanished as Sane absorbed with the help of his light ball. Sane's complexion actually improved over time as he absorbed the miasma. The miasma that enveloped the Eastern barbarian tribes' islands might be a deadly thing to all land of chaos martial practitioners. However, Sane seemed to be the opposite of that rule. He actually seemed to be recovering from the losses he incurred after the failure to ascend to the Void Realm. Strange. Tang Beidou shook his head in silence. It was obvious that the mist barriers were beneficial to Sane's cultivation and recovery. However, he had refused to come over just now. Then, he suddenly changed his mind and agreed to come. He even led everyone deeper into the forbidden lands of the Eastern barbarians. This puzzled Tang Beidou greatly. Remember, don't let your soul altars out, and protect your true souls right now, Sane suddenly exclaimed. Behind him, everyone's faces changed as they subconsciously created soul barriers to protect their minds and true souls. Why have you come, Qin boy? Tang Beidou asked in astonishment when he saw Qin Lai. Whatever's hidden inside the Eastern barbarians' forbidden lands, it's obviously an evil thing that attacks soul. Unfortunately for them, that is exactly the kind of thing I'm not afraid of. Qin Lai grinned. While he was smiling, bolts of lightning suddenly zapped into existence and wrapped around his shoulders like the divine clothes of the thunder god. Right? Tang Beidou smiled and nodded in return. Since Qin Lai cultivated heavenly thunder eradication, he was impervious to most evil soul beings. Even Tang Beidou thought that the evil thing residing in this place should be largely ineffective against Qin Lai. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Sane continued to lead them deeper into the forbidden lands as he and the light ball absorbed more and more of the miasma. How dare you come back, Sane? You despicable bastard. How dare you return after you stole the sacred orb from us? You shameless bastard. At the islands that looked very much like Blue Nightmare Island deep inside the mist, the Eastern barbarians swore loudly at Sane. Sane curled his lips and muttered to himself. An evil thing is an evil thing. You guys are the only ones who call it a sacred orb. I guess the Eastern barbarians were all brainwashed by it. What a tremendous flesh and blood presence. It's even stronger than the flesh and blood of a rank 9 evil dragon. What in spirit realm is inside that place? The soul altar experts all detected a shocking level of flesh and blood energy inside the island when they approached closer. Qin Lai was just as shocked. The unconcealed presence of a tremendous flesh and blood aura caused everyone to come to a stop. No one dared to walk closer any further. The fact that the ripple of flesh and blood energy was stronger than a rank 9 evil dragons meant that the living being residing inside that place was at least in the void realm. Now that Luz and the 2 old dragons had left, they were utterly incapable of fighting what was inside there. That was why a lot of people felt like retreating after sensing the presence. Sane, what in the world is that thing? Feng Yi exclaimed. He raised a hand and commanded all celestial artifact sect soul altar experts to a halt. He didn't want to enter into that place recklessly and caused the demise of his experts before they got a satisfactory answer. Qiang and Lei Yan did the same thing. In a flash, all soul altar came to a halt, not daring to make a reckless move. There is a flesh and blood sacrificial altar inside that place. It is an altar made of the bodies of many beings. In fact, this entire island is made of flesh and blood, Sane said with a dark look on his face. This flesh and blood sacrificial altar has a life and consciousness of its own. I have no idea what it is to this day, but I do know that the old fellows of the Eastern barbarians called the thing residing inside the altar the divine demonic spirit fetus. For many years, they had gathered many powerful bodies to feed this thing. Sane looked at the crowd before saying, "The evil art I cultivate originates from this flesh and blood sacrificial altar. The divine demonic spirit fetus?" Everyone stared blankly at the island deep inside the miasma. It was obvious that no one here except Sane had heard of such a thing in their life. Qin Lai frowned and sought hard for a memory related to this thing inside his soul. Unfortunately, despite thinking hard, he couldn't think of anything. Sane and the light ball above his head continued to absorb the surrounding miasma. Gradually, the thick mist surrounding them became thinner. It wasn't long before the shrouded island became clear. Everyone subconsciously glanced towards the island. The island looked very similar to Blue Nightmare Island with one key difference. This particular island was ripe with the stench of flesh and blood. Countless unidentifiable corpses had been bound together by tense muscles into one literal island of flesh and blood. At the center of the flesh-made island, there was a large flesh and blood altar. The flesh and blood altar was swollen and huge. A strange biomagnetic field throbbed inside. At that moment, a dozen or so elderly Eastern barbarians were scattered around the altar. An evil glint could be seen inside their eyes. An extremely strange atmosphere lingered between the flesh and blood altar and Qianlai's group. Qianlai looked around but didn't see more Eastern barbarians making their way towards them or the nearby islands. It was almost as if the flesh-made island at the center of the thin miasma and the murderous soul altar experts of the land of chaos were the only things that existed right now. Did your evil art really originate from that flesh and blood altar? Li Mu asked softly with a surprised look on his face. Can you give us any details? Qiyang, Fengyi, Yulingwei, Lei Yan, and other soul altar experts gathered around Sane involuntarily. They had all noticed that something was amiss, and they didn't dare act recklessly in this situation. That was why they stuck close to each other and got ready to deal with anything that might be thrown at them. A very, very long time ago, I was heavily injured by the Eastern barbarians while I was exploring this region. Sane's tone was indifferent. It was almost as if he was talking about someone else's matter. After the Eastern barbarians had captured me alive, they tossed me into that flesh and blood altar so the divine demonic spirit fetus may feast on me. The moment I landed inside the altar, I was bound by those muscles, my refined flesh and blood energy being absorbed. Even my soul energy became influenced by many chaotic and distorted strands of consciousness. I thought I was dead for sure. But for some reason, just as I was about to die completely, a strange orb suddenly formed above the flesh and blood altar. Sane pointed at the light ball that was still absorbing the miasma nonstop. This is the orb that I was talking about. The moment this orb was formed, the muscles that bound me on the flesh and blood altar suddenly lost their strength. I was no longer losing refined flesh and blood energy and soul energy either. I struggled with everything I got and climbed right next to the orb. Then, I reached out and grabbed the orb. The altar swelled the instant the orb entered my hand. A terrific howl came from inside the altar. I suddenly discovered that I had obtained a strange, evil energy from the orb. My strength began to return to my body. Before the Eastern barbarians could rush over from every direction, I dove into the deep sea and escaped this place, still holding the orb with me. Not long after I left, I obtained a strange and evil inheritance from the orb. After I cultivated for many years and attained a small degree of success, I returned to the ruined lands. The secret art I cultivate comes from this orb. This orb is a creation of that flesh and blood soul altar. If I had to guess, the flesh and blood altar was in a weakened state after it had conceived this orb. That was how it fell into my possession. Now that I have constructed my soul altar, the more I learned about the evil art, the more I grew to fear this flesh and blood altar. I had sworn never to set foot in this place ever again. Sane stopped talking after that. Why have you agreed to come then? Tang Beidou asked in puzzlement. A strange glint passed through Sane's eyes as he looked at the light ball above his head. I came because the evil art inside the orb isn't complete. Once I've constructed my 4-level soul altar and reached the void realm, this light ball won't be able to aid me any longer. Originally, I was going to wait until my 4-level soul altar was complete before returning at peak strength. He didn't try to hide his true intentions as he gazed at the crowd. But today, most of the land of chaos soul altar experts were gathered in one place. I thought I might not have another opportunity like this. He and the light ball were still absorbing the miasma greedily as he spoke. By now, Sane's gray-dark eyes had regained its light. He also seemed to have recovered a lot of strength in just a short time. Not long after, a trace of blue electricity could even be seen leaping at the corner of his eyes. Qianlai could clearly sense that Sane's biomagnetic field had become powerful and vast. He was probably planning to make a swift recovery too. The young man thought to himself. It was obvious that this place was boosted Sane's recovery greatly. Sane's 4-level soul altar had exploded earlier. If this place wasn't as unusual as it was, Sane might have to wait several years before he could make another attempt to reach the void realm. But now that he had recovered through absorbing the miasma of this place, He only needed to gather the spirit materials necessary for his attempt. He might be able to make an attempt to reach the Void Realm again in just several months' time. Sane had decided to take a risk in order to recover his strength as soon as possible, learn about the flesh and blood altar's secrets, and obtain the latter part of the evil art inheritance. The Eastern barbarians standing next to the flesh and blood altar didn't do anything while they were talking. They simply stared at the crowd from afar. They didn't even stop Sane and the light ball from absorbing the miasma into their bodies. They simply watched from the sidelines and did nothing to stop him. In the end, the miasma that shrouded the Eastern barbarians' forbidden land eternally was fully absorbed by Sane and the light orb. The vast sea and blue sky were in full display. The island made up of endless flesh and blood appeared directly in front of everyone's eyes. Since the miasma is completely gone, we should be able to head over now, Tang Beidou said. The crowd warily formed soul barriers with their soul energy just in case any evil souls attempted to invade their minds. Then they got ready to charge the flesh and blood altar. It was at this moment the light ball above Sane's head suddenly became shrouded by shadows. Strange ripples that looked like the ripples of one's soul lake abruptly spread out. Ah! The soul altar experts suddenly exclaimed as their faces became distorted. Qianlai thought he heard a boom as terrifying evil energy poured into his head. Even his vision was starting to turn blurry. Heavenly thunder eradication. A flash later, thunder and lightning abruptly rampaged throughout his soul lake. The elements flicked across the surface of his soul lake like curtains of light or the rain. A blue, dark shadow swiftly turned into smoke after it was struck by the thunder. Qianlai's eyes quickly turned clear once more. Right now, Sane was clutching his head and screaming uncontrollably as if he was being controlled by a demon. Several seconds later, his eyes suddenly glowed brightly with dark blue evil light. He actually attacked the nearby Tang Beidou. Right now, Sane was enveloped by the blue miasma. His figure was elongated and transformed into an unknown demon. Inside the shadows of light, many sinister-looking demonic shadows moved like ancient demons to tear Tang Beidou apart. Tang Beidou snorted once before covering himself entirely in flames. Then he engaged Sane in battle. At the same time, the distant Eastern barbarians suddenly let out strange howls. The flesh-made island beneath them actually responded and rose into the air. The island of flesh and blood rapidly approached them like an extremely smelly giant flesh demon. When the crowd looked up, they discovered in surprise that many saw-like bone blades had appeared at the bottom of the flesh-made island. The bone blades were manipulated like they were the tentacles of the flesh and blood altar. They swung madly towards them like a meat grinder. Countless blue-colored blade beams rained on them like a web of light. Crack, crack, crack. Two one-level soul altar martial practitioners belonging to Celestial Artifact Sect and Heavenly Sword Mountain were actually cut to pieces by the blue blade beams. Even their soul altars had suddenly exploded under the attack. Whoosh! The bottom of the flesh and blood altar opened like a bloody maw and sucked its victims' remains into it. The Eastern barbarians standing on top of the flesh and blood altar also howled and pounced towards them like a hawk. Sane absorbed too much of that strange miasma and lost his mind. "Everyone watch out!" Tang Beidou yelled. The light ball above Sane's head suddenly turned into a strange light beam and returned to the flesh and blood altar in an instant. The moment the light ball returned to the flesh and blood altar, it looked more and more like a living being. It was almost as if the light ball was the altar's eye. "Everyone watch out!" Li Mu warned everyone with a serious look on his face as he approached the flesh and blood life form that was descending upon them. A silver-colored spirit sword abruptly flashed into existence. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, tens of thousands of sword beams cut into the bottom of the altar like a school of fishes. A sharp, condescending aura emerged from Li Mu's body. Suddenly, he felt like the sharpest sword in the world, capable of piercing through the blue sky in one hit. Many soul altar experts shook as they stared at the torrent of sword beams in astonishment. The sword beams had aligned themselves into strange formations and moved as agilely as fish. Every sword beam even had its own unique whistle. It was as if tens of thousands of living beings were cheering together in response to the power of Li Mu's attack. His refined soul has joined with his sword will to become tens of thousands of sword beams. It is an incredibly high level of swordsmanship. Qin Lai closed his eyes and sensed Li Mu's attacks with his mind. He thought he could almost see Li Mu's refined soul literally riding the sword beams into the air. Wait! When he probed the attack with his soul consciousness again, shock abruptly settled inside his mind. As it turned out, every sword beam Li Mu conjured contained a different type of sword intent. It meant that Li Mu had imbued at least 10,000 types of sword will into the attack. When Qin Lai opened his eyes to stare at the sword beams in astonishment, he couldn't help but feel his respect for Li Mu grow by the second. Li Mu normally didn't show off his skills, so Qin Lai didn't know that he was capable of tens of thousands of sword arts until now. He even injected every sword beam he unleashed with a sword art. This ability was practically unparalleled in swordsmanship. Tens of thousands of blue sword beams abruptly blossomed between Li Mu and the giant flesh and blood demon. They penetrated into the demon's blue-colored bone blades all the way to the bottom. Blue blood fell from the sky like a poignant rain of blue. A roar that came directly from the soul erupted from the giant flesh and blood demon. It was so powerful that many soul altar experts turned pale white in response. Holes suddenly began to appear on the giant demon's flesh-made body. One by one, blue balls appeared from inside the holes. These light balls looked exactly the same as the orb Sane stole back then. A total of 8 light balls could be counted on the giant flesh and blood demon's body. They were its eyes. The giant demon's 8 eyes turned to stare at the invading soul altar experts coldly. Qin Lai felt cold all over under its chilling stare. His god race bloodline actually started boiling on its own. The activation of his bloodline caused his strength to multiply and his hair to turn as red as blood. The giant 8-eyed demon suddenly focused all of its attention on him. Their demonic eyes sparkled with the light of excitement. Qin Lai, it's targeting you, Li Mu yelled. Get out of here right now, Xianxia also said. Qin Lai's expression darkened as he pressed a hand to the silver moon mark on his shoulder, yelling, "Come out!" Many crescent moons flew out of his shoulder and radiated with pure and cool moonlight. The clean moonlight washed against Qin Lai's body gently like water ripples. "Yu Yi, do you know what this 8-eyed demon is?" he asked with his soul. The 9 crescent moons abruptly condensed and transformed into 9 translucent water beads. Every water bead contained a tiny, blurry figure of Yu Yi. The bright, silver moonlight shone onto the giant 8-eyed demon's bloated body. It was Yu Ye's unique way to probe the demon. "I've never seen such a demon in my life," Yu Yi responded. Qin Lai was shocked. The realm Yu Yi used to live in was an entire galaxy away from Spirit Realm. He was so knowledgeable and experienced that he knew about the soul race, the shadow beings, and many secrets of the galaxy. But even he, with his breadth of view, had no idea what the bizarre flesh and blood lifeform before them was. It made Qin Lai grow more and more anxious. It was because all living beings were instinctively afraid of the unknown. It meant that they had no idea how the creature operated, what its weaknesses were, how to attack it, or how deadly it was. This giant 8-eyed demon was unknown to all of them. That was why everyone was feeling some degree of anxiety. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Qin Lai's figure abruptly appeared in the eyes of the giant 8-eyed demon. The young man shuddered greatly in response. Suddenly, the many layers of moonlight Qin Lai had wrapped himself in exploded into many silvery sparks. Bang! His clothes also turned to dust in an instant. Everyone could see veins bulging sinisterly against Qin Lai's naked skin and wriggling about like spirit snakes. Terrifying halos of heat on Qin Lai's skin because his blood had boiled up like lava. A blurry, demonic figure slowly manifested across Qin Lai's chest. Anyone who looked closer would realize that it was a miniature version of the giant 8-eyed demon. The demon's soul has permeated into Qin Lai's soul. Qiang screamed. "Attack the demon's main body," Xianxia yelled fiercely. The moment he said this, a spatial blade appeared on each of his fingers. The 10 spatial blades aligned themselves into a cross shape. The center of the cross brimmed with terrifying energy that could tear apart the flesh of all living beings. Tang Beidou also charged towards the giant eight-eyed demon, while roaring angrily as his surroundings became enveloped in a sea of fire. Qiyong, Feng Yi, and many soul altar experts hurriedly fired off their own spirit arts and spirit artifacts when they saw Xianxia, Li Mu, and Tang Beidou charging. Everyone charged towards the giant eight-eyed demon in unison. Oh! The giant eight-eyed demon abruptly howled. A dozen or so Eastern barbarians flew down from the giant demon's body at once. These Eastern barbarians were all soul altar experts. Moreover, a strange, inhuman blue light gleamed deep within their pupils. The unusual activity of a soul altar that was about to explode suddenly appeared from their bodies. Even Sane's eyes were glowing blue as his physical body threatened to tear apart. He looked like he was literally about to explode into pieces. "Watch out! Don't get close to them!" Li Mu yelled. The martial practitioners that were just about to engage the giant eight-eyed demon in combat paled in fright when they noticed the Eastern barbarians' physical changes. Everyone forcefully came to a stop in unison. Bang! 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 3 soul altar Eastern barbarians abruptly burst apart. The explosion covered a large area. The giant eight-eyed demon seized the opportunity to pass through the rain of exploding flesh and appear right in front of the panicking land of Chaos Soul Altar experts. Many bone blades that were at least dozens of meters long slashed against the martial practitioners and drew even more blood. Yu Lingwei, Feng Yi, and Tang Beidou were all bleeding profusely after they were slashed multiple times by the demon. Everyone was screaming and pulling away frantically. Even Li Mu and Xianxia were only able to cut a few bone blades into pieces before an even greater number of bone blades forced them to retreat. They had no choice but to avoid the torrent of slashes for now and move as far away from the giant eight-eyed demon as possible. How is Qin Lai? Everyone subconsciously looked at Qin Lai to learn how he was doing after they pulled away from the giant eight-eyed demon. By now, the mini-demonic figure had manifested in full in front of Qin Lai's chest. The mini eight-eyed demon clung onto Qin Lai's body like an octopus and plunged its sharp bone blades into Qin Lai's bulging veins. The bone blades turned into suckers that seemed intent on sucking Qin Lai's refined blood dry. "It's aiming for Qin Lai's refined blood." Li Mu's expression changed greatly. Qin Lai was the only person here who possessed the god race's bloodline. This unknown life form had targeted the weakest Qin Lai first because it obviously noticed how special his blood really was. It obviously wanted to claim Qin Lai's god race blood for itself. Everyone was shocked to find the eight-eyed demon draining Qin Lai's blood at a rapid pace the moment they moved away from the main body and looked at Qin Lai. "AAA. AAO." Qin Lai raised his head and roared. It was a mad and violent roar that bespoke his fury and indignation. Glug glug. His blood continued to burn like molten lava. Divine characters sparkled above the liquid like lightning. As his blood continued to disappear, Qin Lai suddenly felt so weak and powerless that his mind was telling him to close his eyes and sleep forever. Suddenly, blood flowed out of the corner of Qin Lai's 2 eyes. It was as if this was the moment he turned completely mad. The stubbornness and brutality that was imprinted his blood manifested in full and turned him into a crazed animal. The young man suddenly lowered his head and bit the eight-eyed demon clinging to his chest with everything he got. He was trying to bite through its skin. A tinge of blue abruptly appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was none other than the eight-eyed demon's blood. Glug! Glug! Throwing all caution to the wind, Qin Lai began to gulp down the eight-eyed demon's blue blood. He didn't care if this blood would kill him. The moment he took his first gulp of the eight-eyed demon's blood, the giant demon in the air suddenly trembled fiercely. The deep, blue light in the 8 eyes of the giant demon started to grow dim at an extraordinary rate. No one could hide their astonishment as they watched. Right now, the giant 8-eyed demon was hovering right above Qin Lai's head. A miniature version of the demon was clinging onto the naked Qin Lai and taking in Qin Lai's blood, using the suckers it grew on its bone blades. Meanwhile, Qin Lai himself was feasting on the 8-eyed demon's blood. The human and the unknown life form were in a mad race to suck the other being's blood dry first. Thump! Thump! Two powerful and erratic heartbeats could be heard from Qianlai's chest. The soul altar experts didn't know that Qianlai's hearts were working way past their normal capacity. The moment the blue blood entered the young man's innards, they became one with Qianlai's blood. While his bloodline was merging with the blue blood, countless deep blue lines began to take root inside his bloodline to form a complicated blood pattern. Inside Qianlai's consciousness, the young man's true soul was enveloped by a layer of blue light. The deep blue beams sparkled and intersected with one another continuously, as if it was trying to imprint a certain secret of the bloodline. It was obvious to everyone that the giant eight-eyed demon had become weakened visibly after Qianlai began devouring its blood. The mini version of the demon clinging to Qianlai's chest seemed to be the giant eight-eyed demon's essence of flesh and blood. It contained the origin of its life force. Glug glug. Qianlai swallowed large gulps of blue blood into his stomach again and again as it became absorbed into his blood vessels and veins. The demon's blue blood was fusing with his blood at a shocking rate. Gradually, a mysterious and poignant, deep blue-colored blood pattern slowly appeared in his blood. A different kind of divine bloodline pattern had taken root inside his blood. At the same time, blue light flashed deep within his soul. A wave band of many cryptic and complicated soul thoughts was also imprinted into his memory. They condensed as one strange inheritance. The eight-eyed demon clinging to his chest suddenly writhed. Both the mini version of the eight-eyed demon and its true body were shaking greatly. Li Mu and the others noticed that the strange blue light in its pupils was growing dimmer and dimmer. Qianlai slowly awakened from his frenzied state too. Suddenly, Qianlai noticed that the blood he was swallowing from the demon's body had turned from blue to blood red. That red blood obviously belonged to him. He could even see the blazed divine characters sparkling on the surface. Invigorated, Qianlai did his best to swallow even more blood. It didn't take long before the demon started growing more and more blurry. He also regained his strength rapidly after he had regained his blood. Dozens of seconds later, the eight-eyed demon that clung to his chest vanished completely into nothingness. Qianlai looked absolutely energized. On the other hand, the giant eight-eyed demon above him obviously lost a large amount of flesh and blood energy. The giant eight-eyed demon let out a roar straight from the depths of its soul as the strange blue light in its eyes abruptly reappeared. The eastern barbarians scattered around the area suddenly flew towards the giant eight-eyed demon recklessly after the roar. The eastern barbarians' soul altar experts willingly entered the bloody maw at the bottom of the giant eight-eyed demon's body and allowed themselves to be fed on. The demon's flesh and blood aura obviously grew stronger. Whoosh whoosh! While everyone was still frightened and shocked, the giant eight-eyed demon flew into the air and charged towards the sea behind the island. It abruptly landed on the sea surface. Tens of thousands of eastern barbarians rose to the sea surface and rushed towards the giant eight-eyed demon like cultists sacrificing their lives for their belief. 8 giant maws opened visibly right beneath the giant eight-eyed demon's eyes. Tens of thousands of eastern barbarians vanished into its bloody maws just like that. As a result, the giant eight-eyed demon abruptly regained a tremendous amount of flesh and blood energy. Its 8 blue eyes glowed with strange light once more. A blurry, blue ball of blood condensed into existence on the flesh and blood altar at the center of the demon's body. They could even hear the obvious sound of heartbeat coming from it. Li Mu and the others turned pale with fright. Qianlai's complexion also changed greatly. Strands of complicated soul thoughts covered in deep blue sparks had suddenly appeared in his mind. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to identify their true meaning immediately. He only knew that there was danger by instinct. After the blurry blue ball of flesh at the flesh and blood altar had manifested completely as a flesh ball, its heartbeat grew stronger and stronger. After devouring 12 or so soul altar experts and tens of thousands of lower-ranking Eastern barbarians, the divine demonic spirit fetus inside the giant eight-eyed demon's body seemed like it was about to give birth to a strange, evil thing. Sane! Sane is over there! Tang Beidou yelled. When the group concentrated, they saw that the strongest martial practitioner of the 7 hidden experts of the Land of Chaos was actually kneeling at the center of the flesh and blood altar, seemingly in worship towards the ball of flesh. His eyes were also glowing with deep blue light. the Eastern barbarians were completely devoured by the demon. No one, not even the dozen of soul altar experts, was able to escape. Sane was the only one that was left alive. He knelt on the floor and kept his head lowered. It was as if he was waiting piously for the birth of a god. Everyone was afraid at this moment. No one knew what was going to happen next. The laws of space are changing, Xianxia suddenly yelled. Suddenly, countless tiny spatial cracks appeared around the ball of flesh glowing with blue light. They glowed with a poignant, deep blue color for some reason. Then they swiftly spread to the surrounding. A dozen or so seconds later, the spatial cracks covered the space around the flesh and blood altar and the giant eight-eyed demon completely. When the spatial cracks grew larger and larger, a beautiful, azure-colored realm vaguely peeked into everyone's vision. The giant eight-eyed demon and the flesh and blood altar slowly descended towards the azure-colored realm before everyone's astonished eyes. The blue ball of flesh at the center of the altar wriggled as if it was shedding dark brown-colored creases. On the contrary, the giant eight-eyed demon and the flesh and blood altar shrank at a rapid rate. It was injecting every bit of flesh and blood energy and life force it had into the ball of flesh at an extraordinary rate. They could all sense clearly that the giant eight-eyed demon and the flesh and blood altar were dying rapidly. As the giant eight-eyed demon slowly descended into the azure-colored realm, the ball of flesh called the divine demonic spirit fetus by the Eastern barbarians finally seemed like it was going to give birth to something. Crack, crack. The sound of an egg cracking came from the blue ball of flesh. After the external shell of the divine demonic spirit fetus had cracked open completely, a curled-up female infant surrounded by blue halo floated into the air. Then, the giant eight-eyed demon and the flesh and blood altar turned into dust instantly. Sane held the glowing female infant piously and descended into the azure-colored realm. After he and the infant passed completely into that realm, space healed itself and returned to normal once more. On the sea surface, the soul altar experts of the land of chaos stared blankly at where the shocking sight had taken place. At first, the terrifying giant eight-eyed demon had devoured the Eastern barbarians' soul altar experts and tens of thousands of weaker Eastern barbarians. After the female infant was born, it turned into nothingness and died. Then, Sane held the female infant piously like he was facing his god and descended into an unknown, azure-colored realm. Finally, the laws of the world returned to normal. Everyone's eyes were blank. No one was able to recover from the shock until a long time later. What the hell happened? An entire hour later, Tang Beidou finally opened his mouth and let out a dry and raspy voice. Looks like the birth of an incredibly terrifying life form, Qiyang muttered. Where are the Eastern barbarians? Where are they? It was at this moment Song Tingyu rushed over with a force of martial practitioners below the imperishable realm from the distance. Even from where they were originally, Song Tingyu and the others had seen the spatial cracks and sensed the extremely odd ripples of space. After the Eastern barbarians had disappeared for seemingly no reason, they finally couldn't restrain themselves and ran over. All nearby Eastern barbarians are probably dead already. Tang Beidou smiled wryly. What in spirit realm happened? Song Tingyu exclaimed. The people behind her also fired all sorts of questions at the soul altar experts. However, the soul altar experts all wore strange looks on their faces. It was because they didn't know where to start. Are you okay? Li Mu flew next to Qin Lai and asked in concern. Do you feel any discomfort after you swallowed this blood? Xianxia and Tang Beidou had also walked closer with odd looks on their faces. Qin Lai's crazed act of devouring the eight-eyed demon spirit's blood was the key that overturned the battle. His actions had caused the demon spirit to lose much of its energy. Sensing that things weren't going its way, the demon spirit had devoured all nearby Eastern barbarians by force and ultimately gave birth to that female infant. Even as it turned into nothingness, it managed to send the newborn away from spirit realm. It would appear that it had fulfilled its mission. In the three soul altar experts' eyes, it was entirely possible that something odd might happen to Qin Lai considering how much foreign blood he swallowed into his stomach. Their faces were all etched with a trace of deeply concealed worry. He won't turn into that giant eight-eyed demon, will he? Tang Beidu thought to himself. Feng Yi and the others also gathered over to stare at Qin Lai like they were staring at a monster. Island Master Qin. Qiyang started, but wasn't sure what to say. Don't ask me. I don't know what's going on either. Qin Lai found himself deeply confused after he finally returned to himself. And he said, I need some peace and quiet. Where do you plan to go? Duan Qianxia asked. Soul Summoning Island, Qin Lai said. I'll send you over. Duan Qianxia nodded and gathered the power of space to open a temporary spatial passageway once more. Qin Lai passed through the spatial passageway and vanished from the Eastern Barbarians' homeland without a word. Song Tingyu tried to follow him urgently, but Duan Qianxia stopped her, saying softly, Give him some time. Song Tingyu pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. Finally, she sighed inwardly and stopped before the spatial entrance. After Qin Lai had suddenly appeared at Soul Summoning Island, he immediately sought out La Pu before spitting out a drop of deep blue blood. After storing it carefully inside a jade bottle, he passed it to La Pu and said seriously, Can you help me check which race this blood belongs to?